The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below. A really nice, refreshing entry, Graham. And I'm so glad that you entered this into this year's 2023 Orchestration Challenge, of which this is the 7th compilation of entries from website participants who subscribe to the Orchestration Online website. So this is my first time back at my desk. I actually got back to New Zealand from a trip to the United States that lasted around 3 weeks. And wow. The return voyage was not the funnest. Still pretty smooth. I really love Air New Zealand, but just circumstances beyond control. And just like I never get any sleep on those overnight flights. So a couple days rest, a lot of sleeping, a lot of catching up to this time zone, and I really wasn't able to work while I was on that trip. It wasn't really it wasn't really a vacation, and it wasn't really business so much. I mean, I did a lot of business there, and I was able to write off the trip, but I wasn't really able to do any work. Do you know what I mean? Like, in terms of composing or orchestrating or coaching anybody. So now I am back in the seat, and I'm really happy to be looking at this score. So without further ado, let us jump right back into it and take a look at how everything is scored here. So Graham, one thing that I would say to you is that I think you need to spend more time proofreading and thinking about the overall organization of certain things that are happening in your piece. All right, so first of all, let's talk about dynamics, okay? Like, what instrument is carrying the melody and why are some instruments marked pianissimo and others piano, and why is there a crescendo here and not in other parts? Do you see what I mean? It's like it's very disorganized. And then here you have a crescendo to forte marked in the piccolo and in the strings, but not in all string parts. Like here you say piano, then forte, and then there's no diminuendo, right? Did you intend to have a crescendo and diminuendo here, or is there any indication of like what the dynamic should be? And then when we get to here, like here we're in a new section of the piece, right? This was just the intro. Now we are in the main idea of the piece. And I mean, are you intending this to still be piano, right? I think once you get to a new section like this, you should mark new dynamics. And there are certain things that really stick out of the sound picture, like this timpani part right here. It's just huge. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, I really like the way that the timpani pushes at the music, but it doesn't really need to be forte to do that, right? Now here we have forte, solo, leggermente, and so on. Usually solo goes above. It's like up here in the technique text, right? So you just say forte, leggermente, and then solo, and you would tell us which instrument is playing solo, right? So here you have 2 flutes marked. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to who's playing what in a minute. All right, but let's just focus on the dynamics. So yeah, so piano, here you have, once again, solo. This should be just in plain text, not in italics. So take the italics off, see, and it would go like up here, right? Is where you should say solo. All right, we'll talk about that in a minute more. Here, a due also shouldn't be italics. It should just be like this, right? So you don't need the big, big A2, right? It's just, just basically saying, hey, there's 2 players on this part. Okay. So here you have forte crescendo, and here you have forte, I guess, is left over from the solo part. And here you have mezzo forte, and then suddenly forte here. So who's doing crescendo and why aren't they, right? Why are some parts fortissimo here and other parts forte? Why do we have mezzo forte on these parts but not on the clarinets, right? So do you see what I mean by things being disorganized? Now let's jump back and talk about, part 1, part 2, due, solo, and so on. So kind of jumping back here, you have these single lines, and you're not telling me who is playing what, right? Is this first and second bassoon? Is this first bassoon, second bassoon? Who is it, right? Is it both, right? Who's playing what? And then here you say solo, but you don't really say who's playing the solo. Is that the first player? You would have to say, like, for instance, where did I just add the word solo? Sorry. Here. All right, so what you would need to do is say, for instance, say 1 solo, right? So you're telling us player number 1 is playing the solo here. You have some, just kind of curious the way that this is engraved. I mean, I can see Sibelius forcing these eighth notes way up here in order to get out of the way of the this dotted half note. But what if we were to do this? Let's see, swap, right? Isn't that a whole lot neater? And then you have the first player playing the first part, and in a higher position, and the second player is sort of doing this lower stuff. So here you could just say 2, right? Right. So your second player just basically starts off here doing these, bump, ba, 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 and then the first player comes in here on this part here. And then you could have the first player take over, or this could be 2 solo. Okay, except for one thing, This is where I would add the sound of screeching brakes. This is a solo part? What makes this a solo part? Right? This is more like a solo part, but it doesn't really need to be marked solo, and I'll tell you why in a minute. All right. So a solo part is something. The indication you should always think. Conductor is reading the score. They see a solo marking. They're going to do their damnedest to bring that part out alongside or even over all of the other parts. Right. Now you did not mark this to be a solo part because, in the first place, your dynamic is softer than everything else in a register of the bassoon that is easily absorbed into other parts. And in fact, this is actually tracking some of those other parts from an octave higher, right? The double bass, you've got this divisi. So this, you might have meant to say, so this is just one player playing instead of 2. But the word for that isn't solo. It would just be this, 2, right? So 2 is taking over again after the first sat in for just a bar, right? So you do not need to mark solo on something that is just intended to be one player, but is not actually playing a solo. Do you see what I mean? All right, now here, and the same thing here, just like I was just saying, all you have to do is just say, let's see, Let's change that to regular type. Let's put it up here. Oops, a little too far. All right, so I would put it like this, right? But it's not enough because you haven't told us who's playing what when. And what's more, you left this big gap here. What's going on here? All right? You've got this slur, and you're not telling us who's playing this. You're not telling us. This is kind of strange. Shouldn't this just be a shouldn't that just be a quarter note or quarter rest? I mean. All right. So shouldn't this be like this? All right. Then you've got the further problem is that you have this slur going over repeated notes, right? 2 repeated notes in a row. So I mean, yeah, you might be thinking, oh, I want this to be nice and legato, right? But wind players and string players don't read slurs in the same way as pianists read slurs. Now, they've gotten used to it because they've had to deal with so many pianist orchestrators who think that they think the same way as them, right? So they'll see like a big line over a big group of notes, right? And then they'll just say, okay, all right, well, I'm the concert master, so I'm going to divide this up like this. I'm just gonna break the slur there and maybe go like just make this as smooth as possible for that guy, or they might say, well, actually, let's do this, right? That way we get down bow, down, up, especially up pushing into the end of the crescendo, and then down as the music goes diminuendo towards the end. Right, and then same thing here. Like you want this all under one bow, da da. Right, so it's like it really is better to go like this. Oops. Just trying to grab the end there. It's better to go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Or you could even go down, up. All right? So don't just drop the pianist's slurs onto everything. Now in the case of the wind players, you have to make sure that they like here you're telling them to like kind of smoosh these notes together and not to really define them, right? There's like no definition to them, right? Shouldn't it be ta 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 ta? Right? Doesn't that sound a lot better than just da? Yeah, it's like there's no push to anything. You see what I mean? So you can't just like this is better. But like, what if you had something like this? What if you had a pattern like this? Right? Same thing here. Oops. Let's actually go. Yeah, so what if the violin player were going down, up, down, up, down, up, and then put a slur here. Oopsies. Down, up, slurring down to down, up. All right, so wouldn't that be better? Okay, so those are all a bunch of things I want you to think about, Graham, and I don't want you to get discouraged that I'm throwing all these details at you. You stepped into this into this challenge, all right, and I'm going to challenge you just right back, right? So that is what you're going to have to put into your next score, which I swear I hope you enter the 2024 Orchestration Challenge because it is going to be something amazing. All right. This piece is incredible, and the scores that I've seen come out of it are some of the best that I've ever had in this Orchestration Challenge. But like the next The next selection that we're going to do next year, that is like music delivered on a perfumed cloud, right? I want everybody in this challenge to participate in that challenge. I'm really hoping, that you will think about this. You will orchestrate more things for yourself. Think about all those things that I put in. Maybe take this score on your own and then just like reshape it in ways that I've suggested to your own satisfaction. And then enter next year's challenge, because wow, would it be great to include you in that. So now let us play fair. Right here I am just picking apart your score. Okay, so I'm going to play fair, and I'm going to use the evaluation criteria on your entry. Okay, all right, you ready? So starting from the adagio, does the intro set the mood effectively? I would say that it does. I think that it's pretty well done. Now, one thing I will say here is that like some other entries, and nothing personal about what you're contributing here, I feel that the whole question of whether or not to use like natural brass and so on is immaterial. I think that you could have just completely just gone with like 2 tenor trombones, like with the way that you've got this scored. You could have had 2 tenor trombones and then just 4 horns in F, and then just scored for those 4 horns in F, and then like 2 trumpets in C or B flat, right? And just because of the character, I mean, you're trying to stay within the harmonic series here, but then you give me these Fs, right? Wouldn't these be better, sounding G, right? So wouldn't it be better on the G horn, right? So anyway, so I mean, don't worry about it too much, all right? But yeah. Anyway, so let's get back to the intro. Sorry, I got distracted by something. You have to forgive me. I'm just really getting back into the swing of things. Yeah, here's another thing: is like really make sure your dynamics are under the entrance note, right? And then stuff like this. This is left over from the score. Like if you're in Sibelius, just type X and that writes it. You know what I mean? Okay, and then just watch out for things like this, right? These should be like quarter rests. So you just hit the quarter note here, or just type 4 on the keypad, right? And then you get that. All right, so so back to this. So while you do set the mood beautifully, okay, my critique here would be that like you have some things that don't quite stack up in terms of support. Okay, for instance, here you have 1 or 2 flutes. You don't tell me which ones. Like you don't tell me if this is 1 or 2 flutes, right? I don't know. So that makes a huge difference about like how does your copyist know which flute you want to play there, right? So and how do I know? How can I evaluate effectively, right? When I don't know if this is 1 or 2 flutes, because it will make a difference. So with 2 flutes, you get a little bit more tone weight here. Okay, but like, you know what would go really, really well here would be like, say that this is, say that like you were to split this up with first and second clarinet, right? The second clarinet playing the harmony part and the first clarinet and so on. Do you see what I mean? Or maybe having this part being played by oboe, because this is like the weakest register of the flute right here. Now, as it climbs, it'll get stronger and more effervescent and brighter and so on. But yeah, like you're trying to add a little bit more warmth to this violin line. And then here you have these rising thirds in your second violins, right? Which is kind of interesting. But you got no support from the winds, right? So this is where I would add the flutes, right? Here's where this is a perfect this is a perfect area for the flutes to add support, right? Just like you have right here, you've got your clarinets, your A clarinets supporting the violas, right? So wouldn't it be better to have like oboe here, or first clarinet, and have that kind of warmer quality, and then have like right up here have that sort of cooler, more radiant, brighter sound in the flutes, right? And then this would be much better support. And then once again, my dude, you have got to correct. Sorry, I just came back from California. You've got to correct how these dynamics work. You can't just have your double basses just yell out here. And it'd probably be way more balanced if these top Gs were played by the cellos, right? So, that way it's just so much. You just the sound will be uniform and have a much nicer tone rather than the higher G being kind of weak, right? All right, so yeah, so that's my view of the intro, right? Now, let's jump to the next concern. Does the melody start with elegance? Okay, well, you got this ya da 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 da, and and then like also thinking natural transition to octaves. You have this lovely like offbeat thing happening, da 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 da. It's really nice, especially with a boom on the timpani. It just really has this nice, almost march-like feeling, but not quite a march, which is something that Beethoven was really fond of doing. Like he had I'm trying to think of one of his scherzos. He has that same vibe, but in 3/4. Is it the 4th or the 7th? Okay, anyways. I'm just focused on your piece. I can't remember a thing. Now, so see here, these long slurs, this is somewhere where you don't have a lot of repeated notes and you don't have a lot of stress implied on the downbeat necessarily, although you could add some. This is where this would be ideal to add a nice long slur, right? So I would say your melody starts with elegance. You do have a kind of a nice natural flow, like you have this going on here, and I've critiqued a little bit on a kind of a more acrobatic sort of a feeling with people just throwing in a low G or a low F and then jumping up to the ya da da dee da, where like there's a string crossing in cello and so on. But here, this wouldn't be a string crossing. This would just be very, very natural with that low G in the second violin being an open string. And so, yeah, so this could all work pretty well. There's no need for you to have such long lines here, though. I would try to reshape your slurring along the lines of what I've suggested here in the first violin, right? Just so that everybody has the same flow. All right, so do you expand without clogging up? Yes, you do. It's nice. I'm not so sure that you really need contrabassoon here, right? All it is doing is just adding weight here. So like you can't really it's doubling what's going on here in the cello and kind of adding an octave above the double bass here. So you lose a little bit of that natural kind of a sound here. And saying that, when you look at the fact that you've already have these trombones in here, well, you've got them marked piano, so I assume that you want them piano here as well. But, be careful not to push them so loud. I would say, if you really want this to balance, don't push to a forte, maybe to a mezzo forte, right? Just don't let them get too big. And then here, you've got the piccolo tracking from above, but unfortunately for this really cool idea, this is the piccolo's weakest register. So, not only is it very weak down here in this first octave, it also will get absorbed. It'll have a tendency to get absorbed by the sound of the strings playing this melodic line. And if you want to know why, just go check out my tip, The Case of the Disappearing Flute, which I believe is available for public reading on orchestrationonline.com. But basically, just very briefly, a nice smooth string line like this has a tendency to absorb a flute-like sound above it, right? And just like it sort of sucks it dry and just uses it a little bit as a nice resonance above, but it doesn't really, like this flute for its own sake doesn't really exist so clearly. Yeah, so here, like places like this where you have some harmony and then you go to a single line is not justified in the scoring. You have to tell us, like, do you go to a duet here, right? And even at that, I would never score something like this. Like, you would either have to have something like this, which is clumsy looking, right? Or you would need to have something like this. Hang on, let's go back to that. Let's grab the, change that to second voice. Change this to second voice, right? See, so that's how you would have to score something like that. You see what I mean? So just like it's really clear what the roles of the instruments are. Okay. But yeah, I mean, there are numerous problems in this that I kind of don't have time to get into. But you know, try not to score your oboes too low when you have something like this where you really want to kind of control the resonance, and you have like a flute part in the middle register and so on. The balance is really quite off right here. I would tend to have the oboe play more of this kind of central harmonizing part, and then the clarinet play this lower, these repeated G's and so on, repeated sounding G's. Okay, now we get to this part right here. Leggermente, forte, solo. Okay, it's kind of strange that you have slurs here, which are perfectly fine, but then this doesn't have any slurs on it. Did you maybe forget to put slurs in? Like here you have ta 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 ta, and here you have slurs in your cellos. Yeah, yeah. By the way, cool idea to have cellos and clarinets in octaves, but you really need the same articulation style, right? My big problem with this is, the next concern that is in my evaluation criteria. Contrast with theme, ? Contrast between lines? No. You don't have enough contrast between the lines. Now, question of harmonic support needed, you don't ask for it, so you don't really need it. In this case, though, like, the problem is that you have the flutes starting off in this nice middle register here at forte, okay? They're not going to be all that strong. I don't know whether this is, you say solo, but I mean, what does that mean? Do you mean if you mean a single flute, then you have to mark it one solo. If you mean both flutes, you need to mark it a duet soli, right? So, or like you could just, if this was intended to be a duet, you could mark this at the beginning, right? So a duet, and then here you would say soli, right? Now, if you intended that to be first flute, then you'd have to say, right? But you cannot just drop a solo on that, especially down here in the technique line, right? It has to be above, and it has to really just tell us who is doing what and why, right? Or not why, but who is doing what and when. So yeah, so let's just assume it's like this, all right? So this is a duet. This is first coming in solo, leggermente. The problem with this is that this response, your response to it, like the subsidiary part. See, this is the primary part. Da 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 dum, right? The response to your call is brighter and in a more prominent register and more supported than the call, right? And you don't have an ending note. Da 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 bum. Right? Isn't that note supposed to end on a sounding E? Or F sharp, meant to say. So yeah, I'm thinking in F. Apologies. So it just kind of like this line doesn't finish and it just turns into the response. So we don't really have any clear definition between the functions, and you have the same instrument playing the call and the response, right? So it muddles up the functions, the clear functions of the instruments. Now here, you don't do that. You go, oh, okay, well, like here's the call in violas and clarinets, and here's the response in flute and bassoon, right? So couldn't this have just been clarinets or oboes, right? Just imagine, and then flute, boop, 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 right? and then clarinets, do 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 do, and then boop 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 boop. Right, so you get the difference between the tone qualities or the timbral qualities, right? Okay, all right. So those are my questions and challenges to you, right? Right back at you. Like, could this have been conceived a little bit more clearly? All right, now our next question is emphatic color of line. Right, and here you have. So you really do you really want this to be down up 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 down? Do you really just want that back and forth and back and forth and back and forth kind of thing? Or do you want it to be more like, or did you leave a slur out because there wasn't a slur in the piano part? Or could you have done something like, up, down, up, down, or actually down? Do you see what I mean? Like, could there have been more? I like the fact that this is harmonized. That's very, very cool. Yeah, and I mean, the problem is that, like, don't we need a little bit of support? Like, here you've got first flute changing to second flute, I guess, on this line. Or no, this is, I see, second flute. So second flute all the way through. Forgive me. And that is doubling the first violin. And then here you have the second violin, and it's got no wind support. Now, the problem, of course, is that you are using flute going down into its weakest register, right? And same thing with the piccolo. It doesn't matter that it's an octave higher. It's like, this is just really, this is a very soft kind of folk flute-like area for it, right? It's sort of like putting a recorder on top of your mezzo forte symphony. It just will disappear, right? So, once again, oboe or clarinet, right, will do a lot more to support this. And then you have two of them, right? Like, so you could have this be played by two oboes, or actually it goes a little too low for, well, A sharp, right? You get a kind of a squawking sound down there, mezzo forte pushing forward to forte, right there in the low part. So I would say probably clarinets would work best. Or you could have first oboe on top, first clarinet on the bottom, maybe, right? So, but one way or another, you could split this up into the reeds, and you get much warmer sound. You don't fall away, right? And these other functions could be played by your flute, right? You could have a different kind of a sound here, like more harmonic, over the top of this line flowing downwards. But I just really feel that, like, this should be slurred, right? Rather than going ta 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 ta. It sounds scolding, right? But wouldn't it be nice to have just like one nice long breath for this on whatever instrument, whatever wind instrument? Ta, or you could go da ta ta, right? So you get a ta on the downbeat. Ta ta ta. Or maybe just get rid of the slur altogether, and you could go dun dun dun. You get a tongue each time, bow on each note, down up down. Do you see what I mean? Because like here you're going down up down on the bowing here. You're going ta 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 on your trombone parts, and the timpani certainly is going bonk bonk bonk. So why are we going slur? Do you see what I mean? It doesn't match, does it? So you have to think about all these things. And also you have a lot of things that don't finish themselves, right? So here you have the second flute part not doing anything, right? This sort of ends with this, and these parts aren't supported by anybody but like the piccolo at an octave higher, right? Wouldn't this be a cool place to bring the trumpets in, maybe? Or, another thing is here you have this ba-ba-ba, what? What happens? Like, you have so little bass support here. Like, you have bass trombone in here, right, playing this low note, but you don't have, the actual C that's supposed to be down there, that's in the original part. Where do you put the C? You put it up here in the flute part, where it doesn't support any, it doesn't have any functional support from below, right? So the harmonic density setting things up, that doesn't really come in until the middle of the bar, right? And it's disorganized so that when this pays off here, none of these parts are connecting with what follows, right? So just really watch out for that. This next part here is done in a very cool way. I like the idea of the clarinets over the trumpets and so on, and the bass trombone below. It's kind of a cool idea. Yeah, might need a little bit, in practical terms, it might need a little bit of filling in. But I'd say make sure that you have a dynamic contrast, right? So crescendo to forte here. Just make everybody, but there's no need for the double basses to be fortissimo against the forte of the melody instruments. All right, so everybody at forte, and then this little answer, bum bum, right, and then dun 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 at forte, and then back to mezzo forte, dun dun. The piccolo is really playing almost no audible role here, right? Doubling these notes here, right? Sounding, it just doesn't really add a whole lot. So anyways, it's a very cool score, and it gave me a ton of things to talk about, Graham, and for that, I'm really, I'm really grateful. And I hope it was like a pretty good, pretty good lesson in score preparation, right? Finalizing things a little bit more editing, and just really the way that a score reader looks at a score, and maybe how to organize the parts. Because look, G, A, B, where's the C? Below, right? There's a lot of functions that Beethoven puts really clearly in the score that just kind of got switched and turned upside down and so on and so forth. I noticed that in a lot of scores so far. So look, before you change the register of a function radically, just really ask yourself whether or not that serves the purpose of the music, right? All right. But, aside from that, I just really think it's charming, and it's just, you came up with a lot of things, perhaps instinctively, perhaps really thinking about it, maybe experimenting and testing different approaches against each other. So whatever you did here, it's pretty cool. Watch out for things like this, crescendo under rests. Do you know what I mean? So we know that this is whatever. You didn't give us a dynamic, but assume it's piano, right? So piano, I would say just come in. It would be better to do this. To come in, say you're going to push to a mezzo forte here, so, right? So just come in at a mezzo piano, crescendo to mezzo forte, and then back down to piano, I guess. All right, so that's better than what you had before. Right? It's just a little, it needs a little bit of work. Right? And then here you've got a crescendo with nothing. But, the crescendo mark is over nothing at all, right? So just watch out for all those things. Watch out for things like this where you have a piano here and a forte there, and there's no indication of crescendo or anything, right? So anyways, aside from all that, maybe I'm going too far in picking things apart, but really good first one out the gate. And, speaking of going into huge detail about things, there's no way that I'm going to be able to avoid it. The next score is going to be a lot of explaining in a very worthy cause for a friend of mine. So strap in because we are going to talk a little bit more about score organization and markings and everything else. All right. But thanks again, Graham. Great entry, and please enter next time because I think you are going to really love the excerpt that I'm going to be offering. All right, Thomas. Very cool score. So, look, I'm just going to start this off by giving you some tips about the score that you sent me. So this is what it looked like after I had imported your music XML. All right. So just a few things, like a few words to you about organizing things for me and so on, and for yourself, just for your own peace of mind as an orchestrator, and as you get better at scoring and so on. Okay, so the first thing is um, you can get rid of the source piano part, right? So in this case, we'll just grab it here and just delete it. Yeah. All right. And then, like, what about the organization of these parts? Here in Sibelius, you can do it like this. Like, horns should really be the top members of the brass section, right? Because they have the closest relationship with your winds. And then alto, tenor, bass, trombone, that's all good, right? Okay, we add this. Now I think I deleted you in your original. You also had like some percussion parts and so on that kind of just didn't, that didn't really play a role. Then kind of going over here, I would say like delivering things to me. Let's say that you get better at Sibelius, or that you start to work with Sibelius, or you work on Dorico or whatever. Just make sure you send it to me transposing. It makes a big difference, right? And then like that makes a lot of these like low horn parts in just, you can see that they're in more reasonable registers. Now the next thing is he sent me a lot of parts, a lot of staves like this, right? Just is better to give me something like this that says a duet, excuse me. Right, so A2, small a followed by the number 2. That means 2 players are playing that, right? So it's just not necessary to send me these things. Now this might be the result of like transferring it over from a MIDI, like you had like 2 players playing something in MIDI, and then it ended up being, understood by the Music XML as being like, unison parts and so on. So I went through your score just really, really carefully, and I tried to turn it into something a little bit more readable, and that is what we've got here. Okay, so just I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time explaining like what to do, but just like if you take it from the standpoint of what I have described just now, and then even just those points, and you look it over and compare like that original, the way that original looked, and to what I ended up formatting for you here, right? All right, and then there were some places where I added a question mark because it wasn't really clear. I think in the original, like you would have like these doubled notes, right? These notes in unisons and intervals, and then it would be followed by like just a single line. So I wasn't sure whether or not this was intended to be a duet or just like a single part, right? All right. Okay, so that is where we're at. So now let us, not to make this evaluation video altogether too long, let's just focus right in on, even more help that I can give you just strictly as an orchestrator. Okay, and now you probably just watched all the things that I said to Graham, and you know everything that I'm going to say now, but I'm going to repeat it anyway. Okay, and that is that the beginning, the flute part that you have scored here, is really going to come off as indistinct. It's not going to have a whole lot of weight and a whole lot of contribution to the timbre right in here. Until about right here, right? So like at this point, and even at this low clarino register scoring that you've got in your first clarinet is going to be of much greater weight and color than a duet flutes played in their first octave, right? So just really watch out. Okay, so I think you have heard me. I have possibly even scolded you, Thomas, my friend, about scoring your flutes too low. You could get away with this if you stripped back everything way, way back. Do you know what I mean? If it was just a duet flutes and no other reed instruments supporting uh, at that proximity, that close proximity, and it was just strings below. You could get away with it, all right? And I would even like go so far as to mark your flute's mezzo piano, right, and have some crescendo in there. Now, like if we listen to the mock-up, it actually sounds great, and that's because really like the color of the clarinets is coming through. But you're setting yourself up for problems, right? So here you're asking piano from the lowest note of the oboe, which is, frankly speaking, piano on the bottom B flat is more of a solo kind of a note. Like you'll see that in Rimsky-Korsakov, right? He'll mark piano, and like the player will approach their lowest note, right? I guess low B for Rimsky-Korsakov's time. But like they don't start cold on a soft piano, right? That is just so difficult to do. And it's even more difficult, like right in the middle of a crescendo like this, to control the quality of the tone, right? I was, some oboists will say I've got no problem down there, and then another oboist, this conductor oboist, once told me, don't give my semi-pro players a low B flat on a crescendo to forte because it'll sound like a quack, right? So it just depends on like the ability of your players, what's the general tendency of that instrument, right? And so you just be careful, right? You just really be careful when you're scoring soft. I mean, just in any case, like the very lowest notes. It's like they're scored with a cautionary red, right? There's cautionary red, and then there's out of range red. They're two different colors. So I think bright red is out of range, and dark red is cautionary in Sibelius. So yeah, so just really these are low notes, and there are this could have been played. This little line here could have been played by like first bassoon, and this would have sounded probably better, much easier to control, and done the role that it needed to do to support the second violin here. The thing that like I worry about the most here is the fact that you got this kind of you've got this integrated sound, but the integration doesn't has a lot of inconsistencies, right? You have like a line starting off here in viola that like leads nowhere, right? I mean, what was the purpose of bringing this in here if it wasn't going to continue on supporting what's going on the second violins, or go to a further subsidiary harmony below? All right, what was the purpose of bringing the oboes here if they didn't complete the harmony here on this final eighth, at least, if not holding forwards through to the fermata eighth? So there's just some questions here, but like the thing that worries me the most is this, Thomas, and that is the tempo, or the general tempo of this piece from the main theme is 120. The adagio cantabile that you have assigned is really, is really not that slow, right? You're giving it 60, which is half the speed of your 120, right? So if we're thinking of 120 as being dun 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 dun, or let's actually just jump back to 60, dun 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 dun. Da 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 da. So you see, it's like just turning this into cut time, right? So like it is so fast. Like your adagio is so fast that when it goes to the main theme, it feels like just like you're at the same speed. You have not really sped up at all, right? You're doing a cut time version of the original tempo. Whereas if you slow it down to like 52. Or 40, which I suggested in my template, right? There's a reason for that. Or like down to 20 beats per measure, or 20 beats per minute, like it was in in Spencer Myer's demo recording, prize-winning performance, I should say, reference recording that I used. Like then you really get a broad So I could say, like, every time I hear, maybe it's just a pet peeve of mine that's starting to develop the more I hear it, but every time I hear this concept of giving this a 60 to the 120 that follows, I feel that it is of detrimental effect to my valuation criterion of intro setting mood effectively, right? I feel that it works against that whole idea of setting the mood, right? Because you're setting the mood, it's like, da 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 da. You could even put a ritardando in here with a fermata. Da 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 da. I'm handing it to you on this big plate. Da 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 da. Do you see what I mean? It's just like it should be two different sections, right? Not a real continuation of the next and so on, right? So anyway, so all that aside, does it set the mood effectively? I think actually, like in terms of the tone color and everything else, it does. But like there are ways of getting this tone color that is much more effective for the instrument. So I would just say, like, just don't take the strength of the flute for granted, right? Just really, like, you would just have to really dial back everybody. Everybody would have to be playing pianissimo here to the flute's piano. And then I would have a crescendo here with the flute, a fermata on this note, and just really, like, bring that out, right? Just have the flute do most of the action here and just, like, cut the clarinet part from here. Just get it out of the picture, or because it'll just have a tendency to dominate what the flute is trying to do here, and it won't be the most beautiful color either. Like with the flute supporting what the clarinet's doing, right? Then you're just adding color to the clarinet part, and that's cool. But the clarinet adding to what the flute is doing in its middle register, that's not the most satisfying tone color to me. Okay. Anyway, all right. So now going on to the next thing: melody starting with elegance. Yeah, sort of. Like, do you really want to not have any tongued emphasis on the downbeat of the beginning of the main theme? You really want to go da ta ta. There's no ta on any downbeat here except for here, right? So maybe just better to go, like, even just like, don't slur at all here till you get to past this. Ta 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 ta. Do you see what I mean? And then here, like, this is just really not like, just go back, and I'm not gonna belabor it. Just check out the suggestions that I made for Graham, right? So that all that applies here. So I don't know if you watched my materials, my 12 common scoring errors, this is one of them, right? Dropping piano type slurring onto strings, winds, and brass, right? It's a completely different thing, right? Because the player needs to have a bowing scheme, right? They need to go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? So you just really have to, like, put a slur here, and then a slur there, and then a slur there, right? And there's different ways of organizing it, but this is not thinking about the player's length of bow, right? And then, and the same thing here. It's like, why do we have a slur? Like, the player has to bow all of this, right? Under one single bow. So shouldn't this be like something like this, right? Where, like, they're going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? So that makes sense. But, like, just putting both of these guys under the same bow, right? Now, you can get away that with a wind part, right? That makes total sense until you get to a place where, like, you're just repeating the note, but you have a slur. But, like, you didn't really do that much here. So, like here, you've got two D's under a slur. So, I mean, that's a little, do you mean something like this, where the bottom note is tied, right? I mean, same thing here. Is this supposed to be a tie? Like, it'll come off, like, not tied, but, like, not really articulated very aggressively on the next thing. So, like, and of course we can avoid that by just moving the front end of the slur forward a beat, right? Like I was sort of suggesting before. So you get a ta on the downbeat, right? For instance. Anyhow, all right. So yeah. So like, I mean, does the melody start with elegance? I mean, just I would say like, once again, like here you have oboes. You have oboes and clarinets. I'm not sure if this is a duet or if this is a single clarinet. You're not telling me, and it wasn't clear in the part in the original score. So here you have all three of these instruments all playing the same thing at piano, plus doubled by all three of your winds. So this is going to have a very intense band-like sound, and also you're adding a C trumpet to that as well, right? So I mean, and this just brings up another thing. Here we're getting into like the idea of natural trumpets, like natural brass. I would say that like, with the way that you are scoring things so freely all throughout the ranges of these instruments, you are not dealing with natural brass, right? So this might as well all be just in F. And I think you just get much better results, right? So don't assume, don't like if you're gonna score pitches that are not in the scheme of the natural brass, or don't make compensations in a sort of a typical way. Like for instance, like just like this stuff is totally out of range for like a natural brass player, right? For instance, right? Or this is just not typical, right? It's doable, but it's damn clumsy. Like this is great though. Like that would be great on a natural horn, for instance. So if you're not going to spend a ton of time trying to compensate and work that out and stuff, then just don't even bother, right? Just score for horn and F, and you're fine, right? I only was offering the whole natural brass thing if people wanted to look at it as another part of the puzzle, right? All right, so and once again, remember everything with a question mark on it was not marked as a unison in your score, right? But I put a duet in most places that, where like you had unisons and so on. All right. Okay, so I would say that just there's really heavy doubling on all of this. So you could really lighten the character here by just drawing back on some of this intense doubling. One thing I will say though is that like you have a nice mixture of functions in here, and you kept them for the most part in their proper registers. So so that's why this works, audially, right? Like just like listening to it and comparing it to the original, there's like a lot of the functions work pretty well. I mean, there's things like this, like you've got this second voice part here in the double basses, so you don't really need it in your cellos, right? As a second voice, right? You just have it here in the basses, so just leave that alone. And then here you have your basses got just like doing this crazy, like just really jumping way high here. But look, you've got that in the cello, so why did the basses need to go, this is what I mean by an acrobatic part, right? It's just like, it really is like the your players are just kind of jumping all over the fingerboard to try to get this right. Now you might, for all I know, Thomas, you are a professional bass player, and, like this, you sort of eat this stuff for lunch. So, if so, no insults intended. But I just feel it's a lot of work. It's not going to sound a whole lot better, right? Then here you got this contrabassoon part, right? And you got that covered with your bassoons. You got a duet bassoons here, right? So like, I mean, why does contrabassoon need to even contribute, right? Like if you got bass trombone coming in here, that is a powerful instrument, and tenor trombone working together. Why couldn't you just go boop here with your bass trombone and just have your tenor trombone come in here, do dee do dee do dee do, and then here you could have your tenor trombone hold this note and your bass trombone come in and go do 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 do. Do you see what I mean? So like, there's no need for them to be playing all so much at once, right? It just makes a very, very thick kind of tone picture. All right. So do you expand without clogging up? Not according to your mock-up, but yes, according to the practicalities, right? So I just would say lessen the parts in here. Your trombones do not need to be doing all. You could just leave them out, and you'd leave out the contra part here, and you could simplify the double bass part, and you would still get all the energy you need. I mean, there's no need for the tenor trombone to be doing this and your second bassoons to, be doing like just something really completely unimportant here and then dropping out entirely. This could just stick with the trombones. Excuse me, this could stick with the bassoons as long as you like, right? So yeah, so just watch out for that. It's clogging up not by much. I think there's a natural transition to the octaves. I think that's cool, but yeah, so just watch out for all that stuff, all right, man? All right, so let's go to the next part, though, the Leggermente. And I thought that this was particularly strong. I like the fact that you did it without slurring, right? So like slurring is working for some of these entries, not for others, right? But in this case, you just have the yada da 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 da. Here you have you are implying a divisi here by having two voices, right? There's absolutely no need to do that because you have so much weight in all these other parts. Having divisi violins is like half-strength violins against just the monster weight that you're implying here, which once again you could just leave out half of these instruments and get a satisfying sound, right? And like da 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 da. I mean, it's just so much weight on this E, right? Just chonky, right? And of course, like the trombones are going to be about half as nimble. Apologies, trombonists, as like your horns here, right? The horns have this just natural kind of fluidity. That's another reason to put them close to the winds, is that they just have this nice, like they almost have a woodwind-like kind of flow in some of their capabilities. Now in others, like some very very tight playing, the flutes might be closer to trumpets in their dexterity, right? So, but in this case, I would say, like you got so much weight on this E. Why do you need to have the cellos adding to that weight, and then making the double basses just go screamingly high, right? Why couldn't this be played by the cellos and just give the double basses a chance to take a breath here, right? And the same thing here, like why have the double basses go to so much trouble when nobody's going to hear them with all this weight that you've got on the part by all these instruments? And also this is, jumping up to this A here in this contra part. It's just, contra players, a good contra player can do this, but I mean, it's, when you already have a duet bassoons there and trombones and horns and all this going on, like who's going to hear the contra player, right? So just cut this out, lighten the load, So I would say, aside from too much weight on the destination note of the yada da 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 da, right? So it's just like it's really weighty, right? And having a lot of weight on these parts, you could easily clean this up. Just take you half a minute, and then this part would really flow beautifully. I would actually put more. Here's where I would want to double your violins, right? So just have both sections or sets of violins. Both groups of violins play together if you're going to have this much weight in winds and brass and so on. And just change this to a cello part and just leave out the double basses. Maybe they could just go and do a little oomph of a 16th at the beginning. All right, so next issue. Emphatic color of line. Oh yeah. Harmonic density, setting up something leading to a particular texture. Maintain strength or not? You decided to jump to a piano here. Okay, so I would say in the context of your kind of more modern approach scoring here, you should say piano subito, right? And you should be really, really clear how big you're going to get. Right? So just like definitely, crescendo, like just add a forte in the middle of these bars, or else this is kind of a throwaway, right? If you're just starting from piano going up to mezzo piano here, and it's just, like that's what Sibelius will interpret it as. It'll increase things. You give it a hairpin, it'll increase things by what it considers to be 1 degree, right? So that'll be like the difference between piano and mezzo piano. That's why you have the tone weight here, which implies force, right? But it's not really all that forceful, right? And that because when you drop down to a piano here, it is not really all that soft, right? So make sure you mark this, right? Now, I mean, do we need the piccolo here? Is it really adding anything that the flutes wouldn't, right? It's the weakest register of the piccolo here. And even at that, here you have the flutes descending down into their weakest register. This will not be heard, and this will not be heard. So you could just cut both parts and you get rid of this. You don't need the piccolo at all, right? Okay, who's got the gusto here is your clarinets and oboes, and especially going down here to this B flat. I would actually say I would just drop the oboe from right here, right, and just let these players just do their thing. You know what I mean? Because you've already got this trumpet right in here, or you've got two trumpets in here. So like the oboes are pretty much going to disappear. The clarinets will contribute somewhat. The violins will contribute with the violas and everything. Why did the violas just stop here? What happened? Why can't they continue to help? And they're gone. And then here they reappear. I don't get it. Anyways, so what I really like here is that you do use the harmonic density, the natural scoring of the part to set up what happens next, right? It's just way too much weight in here. Like if I were coaching you in terms of orchestration, we would be cutting out some of these parts, right? Because you just don't need them. But like you have enough to set this up. So the only question is, does it make dramatic sense? You have to really ask yourself, do you really want da 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 dun dun dun, right? Or do you want da 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 dun 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 dun? Which sounds more like Beethoven to you, right? What sounds more like Thomas Jester to you? So just think about some of these consequences, because I think it's set up really well, but I just feel like you have got so much weight here. You are going to a payoff, right? It just sounds to me like you want this to fulfill itself, but it doesn't, right? So I think you could make your hairpin marks go all the way to the end of the bar and end with a forte, and then drop to a piano here. And I think it would be like twice as dramatic. And that's not me judging you and telling you how to be dramatic. That is me judging what your scoring wants to do according to my ear. All right? One last little thing in here, and that is, let's sort of drop this in here and then put a bass clef, right? So if you had a situation like this, you just would really want to score it like that. Okay, you could put the treble clef back here too if you wanted to. But generally speaking, if these were both F parts and this were actually, you would want to sort of reorganize things. But like this is really actually the same as this, right? In terms of sounding pitches. So you end up with things like this sometimes with your basso horns being in treble clef, but your horns in a higher pitch, your alto horns being in bass clef and then treble, just because of having to reach lower in terms of the written pitch. Okay, so I'm not going to overanalyze this. I would just say, once again, if you are going to score this as piano, if you really want to hold on to that and you feel that that's the right thing to do here, lighten it up. Lighten it up. Let the lines finish that are doing something, right? But there's no need to add more weight. Right? Just try to lessen things. Like here, the flutes will just be completely invisible, right? Just inaudible. And then, with all of this weight that you've got here in your trumpets, you're also, just smothering some of this stuff that's going on here in the winds. So, the strings, you could score this as say mezzo piano in your strings and winds, right? And it would help balance a little bit. But, not yes and no, because the brightness of the registers that you're putting some of these things in, like horns here and here, right? That will tend to be much, much brighter. This high F in your C trumpet and so on. These C's here in your tenor trombone, they'll tend to speak out, right? So yeah, so you're setting yourself up for a lot, just by adding so much, so much doubling and so on. I think that you while you have like a real robust, satisfying sound, we're missing some of the uniqueness of color, right? And this is the danger. And then like also like scoring, like just in general, you are scoring your strings in a kind of subsidiary position throughout this whole thing. Like this is the only place where they really get that much of their own thing happening. Most of the time they're doubling things, and they're doubling things below or at the same lower pitch as other things, right? So it's like it, you know, you could have had like your violins here at octaves, right? And then doubled at an octave higher by the flutes. And then the flutes make perfect sense. And then coming out of this with the flutes and the first violins being an octave higher, right? It just would make total sense. You'd have that bigger kind of orchestral span. And then the trumpets act to brighten that higher pitch, right? Rather than dominating any kind of string sound whatsoever. All right, so those are my thoughts on your piece, Thomas. And wow, this is like these first two entries are really long, and I don't want anybody who follows this to think, like if my commentary on your entry is only like 18, 20 minutes long. It's like, it is not because I care less about your entry. It might be because I have kind of less to say in terms of editing, or I've already said what I've said before in these two entries. So you really have to watch everything in one compilation, because my comments all make sense, in across the entire thing. It's not really intended for me just to, talk about one score to the exclusion of any of the others in context. All right. So anyways, I mean, like really showing huge progress as an orchestrator, Thomas. So like, just like I said to Graham, the next entry is going to be really incredible. So like, don't miss that one. I just, I would really love to see your thoughts on that one. Okay. And great work on this. I just found it really gripping in parts. So excellent. All right. On to the next entry. Now that is really awesome, George. Um, it's almost like Carl Maria von Weber right here at the beginning. Yeah, just so fun. And all of the different variations of character that you have going on here. You know, just really, really nicely done. Now, the mock-up is, in some respects, not relaying the strength of the part, of certain parts, and in other regards is telling you the truth about certain things. So we'll talk about some of those things. But first of all, I want to call everybody's attention to, once again, this situation here, that Sibelius doesn't automatically fix for you. Like, it will change a partial bar like this into like a bar rest, right? So you have to go and correct that, right? And if there's a fermata on it, then you have to put the fermata back in, right? And then same thing here, right? If this were to appear if this were to appear in the part, it would give the player just the absolutely completely wrong idea about how many bars to count, right? Let's put things back the way they were, right? Now let's check out your celesta, or no, actually your bass drum part, right? So here we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bars, right? If you sort of count this as these two partial bars as adding up to 6 bars and so on. And then these notes coming in. So if we just jump back here and take a look at the bass drum part, you can see how this was all interpreted, right? That that Sibelius has taken that partial bar and turned it into a full bar joined to this multi-rest, right? So it's, how to throw your players off seriously, savagely. So yeah, so just really watch out for stuff like that, okay? Little details. I left them back in, but just, that is one thing that I feel that Sibelius should have fixed. You shouldn't be able to make this mistake in Sibelius, in my thinking. Like, you should be able to impose that. I mean, if you want to create the mistake for some strange notation reason, you should be able to, but it shouldn't default to it like this on a pickup bar or a partial bar, right? Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at this beginning and discuss a little bit about like how the mock-up is lying to your ears. Okay, one of the reasons why is just very simply, if you had actually presented 4 separate staves in the playback, and they were all playing this line here, right, and then splitting up this between 2 different pairs of bars, then you would hear it a little bit more realistically. But yeah, these unison horns pushing up to a mezzo forte will be an enormous sound, and it doesn't matter that your strings and middle winds here or lower winds are playing at fortissimo already. You'll just get this massive sound here, and like even the trumpets coming in right here are, like, you really only will begin to hear them as they rise up to this high A. Okay, so that's one problem. I mean, I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's just, you have to judge for yourself if that's the sound that you want. Now, certainly, like, the way that you have the octave line above so heavily doubled and tripled and so on. Say here, like with with both sets of violins and the clarinets and so on, and the flutes coming in later on, which, by the way, congratulations for not scoring pitches that are too low to really matter, right? So that was great that you left these bars out. Like, you didn't put this into your flute part. So, so with all that weight on top, you definitely will get the feeling of the octave, right? You can also tell that, like, these, in the mock-up, these trumpet octaves are certainly inelegant, aren't they? They have just a real, I'm almost crude. I don't want you to get the wrong idea when I say crude, but they're just like really, they stand out, and they don't really have much grace to them, right? They just are, they're just really in your face. So, you could correct this a little bit by doubling it with some strings or with winds, or there are a bunch of different ways of dealing with it. But I would say just leave it alone, because there's something kind of nice, there's something very period about that as well, right? Like, a lot of times the great masters of that era made those kinds of decisions, and by masters in this case, I just really feel like Weber, right? If you're thinking of, maybe Berlioz to a degree, but this really reminds me more of Weber than anybody else. And here, this is really lovely, right? And here you got the cellos sort of playing these, a bit of a paraphrase of what happens later on in the left hand, the boo-doo-dee-dee-dee, but like doing it as sixteenths. Now here, obviously, like if we put the, let's see, I'm gonna put, I have all my invisibles turned off. But if we see that it's 60 at the beginning, right? And then here at your Allegro non troppo, I'm going to go Y, and then here you have cut time 60, right? So this is exactly what I'm talking about with other entries, about how if you turn the adagio at the beginning into 60, and then the allegro non troppo is 120, then basically you're turning this into cut time, right? Okay, now in this case, because the intro is not really an adagio, it really is just more of like this equals this. Seriously, you might as well just have had the entire thing allegro non troppo cut time with these values increased by 100%, right? Or doubled in value, so that it could all be, because like there's nothing adagio about this. Ya da 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 ba ba dum. I mean, come on, like, and then you're using like we've got 30-second note little pickup, like at the end of the dotted rhythm, right? So so this is not an adagio at the beginning. Okay, so like just for reference, future reference for everybody, if anybody is watching this who will need it. If you're going to change the intro that much, then just change it. Just go ahead and just go the whole hog. Or, redo all the change this into cut time, change this into 4 beats per measure, right? So this eighth would be a quarter, right? And then this would be like a dotted eighth going to a 16th and so on, right? Okay, so if you're going to do that, you might as well just go all the way, and that's really what a conductor would want, right? And then this right here at the end could be I would recommend this turn into a dotted half note, maybe with a fermata, maybe it doesn't need it, maybe it just needs a cesura at the end, right? Okay, so so just to turn to my trusty evaluation criteria. Hang on, I changed my setup since the last time, since the previous evaluation that I have on this same video, and I moved some things around, so I'm putting them back in their place. All right, so does the intro set the mood effectively? Oh yeah, yes it does, because you're just really going for this, for like this sort of Freischütz kind of an approach here. So absolutely, so that works great. So does it work orchestrally? I think that you are overdoing it here and there in terms of what you need, right? I mean, I think you could completely get the effect that you want here with less voices, right? So for instance, if you have this much weight on your horns and this horn part, then these bassoons, they could be playing this part down here in the double basses, right? Or supporting it, right? There's like kind of almost no need for the bassoons to join into this particular arc. However, if you want that really musty, powerful, intense sound to join up with the horns, then great. But like they will really, by the time we get to right around here, like on this, like going up here, I'll do a past middle C, going all the way up to A. This is just basically gets swallowed up by your horns. Nobody is going to hear these bassoons, right? They're just too powerful at a 4-part unison, right? 4-voice unison. Now, as to the trumpets, I really like the fact that you don't have the trumpet. It's just like the flutes. You don't have anything kind of leading into it, because like it just won't really be heard over the crest of what's going on here with the horns. In fact, you're essentially dovetailing, right? So that works fantastically well, I felt. But yeah, like with these trombones, you've got these 2 low parts, right? You've got you're writing these low Fs and so on. With the bass trombone and so on, it's almost like a tuba part here, and the contrabassoons and everything. So it's like, who really needs the help here? It's the divisi double basses, right? It would be better to to have your second bassoon helping out with this triplet right in here below the trombones. If you're not going to have your bass trombone help out, right? So, so that's just one example. There are several. I mean, we don't really have time in every one of these evaluations to pick apart every single thing where you could possibly, possibly require a little bit of tuning up and everything. But that's an example. Now, if you had added a bass clarinet, then I would say just have the bass clarinet double what's going on here in the cello. So because otherwise, the sense of motion right in here is completely lost, right? That pulse, that sort of running pulse. Okay, and one other thing too is like, this tied thing happening here in the timpani. I mean, there's a couple different ways of thinking about this. First of all, this is better. Okay? Actually, get rid of the dot here. This is better. All right? However, you could also do it like this. Okay? That's also better. But the whole tied thing, like tying durations in timpani, I mean, it's just kind of overkill. It just doesn't really, I mean, I do have a tip on like give the timpani player as much information as possible, but like you are scoring something that is meant to evoke a certain period, right? And in that period, they did not have rhythmic schemes like this for timpani. Okay, so simplify, simplify, simplify. All right. Then finally, one last thing here is that, if you are going to be scoring at 60, then you would want this to be a quadruple beam, right? Because otherwise, like, we can really count. Like at 60, you can go, it really is not it isn't like a, it isn't a roll. It is more of a, separated pitch, separated, measured pitches or measured rhythms. So yeah, so just in a slow tempo with rolls or what you intend to be unmeasured tremolo, just add a beam. Okay, all right, okay, and then you'll also hear like in your mock-ups that'll be a lot cleaner. All right, so like your bowing schemes are pretty good, but I'm a little puzzled why you go down up here, and here you just go down, right? And then this is up, down, but like maybe you want to end on a down bow here, but like the players you've already established da da da, right? If you want this to really be savage, you could go down, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? And you just really get that kind of savage slashing kind of a feeling, right? I mean, why don't people slash anymore with the way that they assign their slurs in for bowing for the players, right? And that solves a lot of problems, and it gives just a lot, like with fortissimo, the players can have faster bows, and the faster bows, right, give the slashing sound and give the more intense kind of a push. All right. Well, it's early in the morning and I'm full of chocolate, so I'm getting real excited here, but yeah, just make it match, right? And maybe don't do this da ta da, da ta, right? It's like down up is way better, and they can just go up again if they need to. That's not really your decision, right? But I would just say, like, for the best bowing, if this is adagio, see, like, if you had changed, if the cut time happened way back here with doubled, doubled durations, on these, so that it's all like, four quarter notes per measure, and done in cut time, then it would be really obvious that you would be going like down on the quarter note and up on the dotted rhythm, right? Which would be like dotted eighth leading to 16th, right? That would be much more natural, and you wouldn't even blink an eye. But the fact that you have these smaller durations is fooling you, right? It's adagio, so I really feel you should go down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, right? Because you want the slash here. And then same thing here, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? See, it solves your problem for you right there. Okay. All right, and then right in here, look, see? You got a slur on your little dotted rhythm, just like you should do here, right? All right. Okay, so I'll shut up about it now. But those are my comments, my sorely incomplete comments on your introduction there. Okay, so now the next concern in our bucket of criteria is, does the melody start with elegance? Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. So you've got this solo trumpet. That's really nice with the, sehr zart. We've got our violins here, doubling from the octave above. And this is a really nice combination, by the way, folks, because you have the weight of the violins, of like both violin sections. They're not going to get blotted out by the resonance of the trumpet. And you've got the balance here of, all of your violins, all 60 of them, or let's see, sections. I'm overdoing it on the section. All 32 of them, or 30 of them. All 30 of them playing above a solo trumpet, right? So that gives you the... Yeah, and then I just love this, this sort of counter melody idea here. Yeah, yep, that's really nice. And then with your winds coming in. Okay, it's a lot of winds. I don't know if you need this much, and especially with both flutes on the top there of this octave. I almost feel like you could have just let the flutes out and then had them come in right here, right? But I mean, it still works. It's a hell of a lot of timpani, though, my friend, even at piano, right? And you kind of want to avoid overdoing it on the dynamic mixing. So this is cool, like forte on the winds and strings, mezzo forte on your brass. But then we're adding a further thing of like timpani, piano. Yes, I know it's forte on the horns. Then just like a further element of dynamic mixing in here. Okay, so far, I mean, I love the idea of the trombones in here. They really fill in this, and they remove the obligation of the cellos and the violas to sort of fill in this part, right? So that frees up their different roles. This is just really lovely what you do here in the violas. If there would be one critique, I would say, like, I would really want some of this to be supported in the winds, right? So, and how could you do that? Well, you could have English horn and bass clarinet, right, covering this part. While and that would really provide some, but like when you get into here, you have that kind of counterpoint going on between the different figurations. So yeah, I mean, not to overdo it, but still, you sort of create a little bit of a problem by the violas being almost invisible here. All right, so everything is going along great, and then you got to bring in the celesta. Okay, all right. So not to be too critical about this, but here's a case where your mock-up is not lying to you, okay? It's not lying to you because, what have I said before? Repeat after me. Celesta is just as gentle as the harp and is easily buried in any kind of complex, loud, intense sort of texture, right? And, it doesn't matter that you have very limited horns right in here, like dynamically, and that you dropped your strings down to piano, except for your violas right in here. Just alone, the weight of these winds here, especially adding the piccolo, will be enough to drown out any attempt here from the celesta. Now, does that mean that you should not have any bell-like sound in here? Not at all. I think that you could basically just get rid of this lower, this left hand part for the celesta, and then just transfer this over to say like a glockenspiel, and then you would just have what everything that you thought that you wanted will be there, and including these parts and this right in here. But like simplify this. Don't have five parts for your poor your poor glockenspiel player. Just you don't need your celesta, all right? Like it's a cutesy filigree decorating kind of instrument, but it's just really not needed. In the context of what you're trying to do here, I mean, you are sort of evoking the spirit of Weber here to a degree. So like you don't really need you don't need the celesta yet, right? That's 60 years later. You'd be better off with something that he did have access to, which was glockenspiel. All right. And, I mean, it could be a keyboard Glock, and you could make this part a little bit more complex and leave this in, right? So that's also fair, right? Jeu de timbre, right? That's what you would be going for. So, all right, and this is here, luftig. So do you mean, when you say luftig, do you mean flautando, right? Yeah, like, I know that that's not exactly the same definition, but just like for the way that this is going. Anyway, all right, and then this is all really lovely right in here, like no problems at all. Now people might be wondering, well, why aren't you changing this back into like a transposed part? It just makes so much more sense. And I mean, honestly speaking, I could, if we go here, change it to a transposing score, and then you see that like the horns like make a whole lot more sense. And yeah, that's all real cool. But like I don't know, I just feel like leaving it alone this time. Okay. Now, just thinking about all of the other criteria that I had. Is there a natural flow? Yes, there is. I sort of have talked about that. Do you expand without clogging up? Of course you do. Yeah, that's just like really nicely done, in fact. Once again, if there's anything clogging, I think it's just overuse of the timpani, right? I mean, you just really don't need it. Like, I mean, the cellos playing staccato here are enough, right? I mean, you could maybe double them with contrabassoon, right? Or I don't know. That's kind of high for contrabassoon, but you see what I mean? It's like you could have this low F being played by contra, and then you could throw this in as second bassoon, right? And then the first bassoon playing this higher part. And then just get rid of the timpani playing the triplets right in here. Maybe just like leave this part in and cut everything else. I just feel it's a lot. Okay, so natural transition to octaves. I mean, like you don't really like you do this more as a harmonized thing, so that's like not the same thing. So that is pretty much not something we don't really need to talk about. So now let's go on to contrast with theme. That's beautifully done, right? And you lead into it really nicely with the violas and bassoons right in here. It's really nice. So we've got the yada-da-da-da-da-da-dum. I like these little bits and pieces that you kind of where you've got the first oboe coming in here and just like giving a little bit of support from below. Now, of course, I mean that could have just been like a duet with second flute as well, but it gives it a nice color. And I really do like the way you add, like harmonic support needed. You do add that with your viola, with a first bassoon and viola combination, which works out really nicely. And then just, once again, like this really reminded me of Oberon. Speaking of Weber, right in here. And of course, like Glockenspiel would be so much better here in portraying that. Or even like if you feel like you didn't get enough bite from Glockenspiel, a xylophone would work really great on this too. So yeah, and then just the differentiation, the contrast between lines, so important, I feel. going from flute to clarinet, back and forth. The focus of the audience's ear is going to be on this like plink plink kind of thing happening in your piccolo and mallet percussion, or let's say, and pizzicato strings. So really, it doesn't matter. Like you don't have to go, okay, well, I'll have flute here, clarinet there, and then piccolo here, and like I just want to change everything around every single time. Or you don't have to do that because of the focus, where you put the focus of the audience's ear. So great work on that. All right, so now, emphatic color of line. Yeah, pretty much. One thing that I miss here is that, what does, Beethoven says crescendo, right? So I'm not seeing a crescendo here, right? I mean, you have like we have a sort of sparse kind of Midsummer Night's Dream sort of feeling to this, and then we have a thicker texture, sort of a little-ish, right? But that's not a crescendo, is it? Right? Anyway, this works great though. Flutes over clarinets, and if as long as you don't really have a crescendo here, then this will pretty much work. We start getting lower, like down here, like with the clarinets are getting down into a very sort of intense, juicy part of the register, and the flutes are getting kind of a little bit into a more like sparse part of the register. You might well ask, like, well, why don't we just have why don't you just go dovetailing to the oboes right around here, or maybe right around here, where like the change in or just have the whole thing be maybe like oboe from right around here, I guess, like starting on that high F. I mean, it's not impossible for the oboe, but it's not the most beautiful sound. So, but yeah, so like do you have a little bit of harmonic density right in here? Could have been a lot. Like I mean, you could have done a lot more to set this up, especially if you're going mezzo forte with your horns right in here. Now, people might ask, well, what about doubling the low horn line here instead of just having it fourth horn? Well, it's sufficient to have this line doubled by your second bassoon. So the two instruments will work together, and the second bassoon will help stabilize the fourth horn part. But yeah, I mean, you could have had second horn on this as well, and that would be even more stabilizing, right? And you could have maintained that soft, that softer kind of a sound. But for that matter, you could have just not had fourth horn there and had contrabassoon doubling this low part, or even cello, right? Okay, so so going forward, once again, pizzicato, dun dun dun, and like this is, speaking of putting xylophone here, xylophone would also work very very nicely here. Just soft, keeping it soft, not to overdo the sound. But I kind of like the idea of glockenspiel up there. It's very charming over staccato, staccato stopped horn. Now you must cancel the stopped thing, right? So let's get our keypad back and just give it one little thing, right? Just one little just like sort of, and then like this is the weird thing about marking stopped pitches, is that you must mark a stop over every pitch. You don't just like mark a stop and then it's stopped continuously, right? So that, of course. But the weird thing is that when you mark open, that is considered to be the default, and so that maintains. So like you see, it's like not consistent, but it's logical for the player, right? Just to be reminded, oh yeah, I'm going to stop all these pitches, and now I'm going to go back to open. So just give them the courtesy of giving them a harmonic or the letter O, right? Is another way of doing it. So yeah, so far as like all this is scored, it's pretty nicely done. If you're going to go F G A here, you don't really need to have triple stops in one, and and double stops in another, and like just don't overdo it for any one player. If you can, if they're going to be sharing a lot of pitches between them, then just have them both play double stops, right? Rather than just like putting a lot of stress on one player and very little on another. Just make them all kind of And then if you have situations like this where some pitches could be shared by others, right? Like here you got these two C's being covered by your second violins, right? And then you're dividing your cellos like quite extremely, Maybe these pitches in here could be covered by your violas, right? And then as far as this, you've got the A in your you got the A here, and you see what I'm saying? It's just like there's this could be organized a lot better, I think. Right? And this is lovely right in here. These, your little string quartet, that's great. And this works good too. Yeah. So no big complaints there. All right, so really great, George. I mean, I think you had wanted to support on Patreon and give me a longer score, and wow, that would have been interesting, to have a real just continue with this. Imagine the B section and the C section. Maybe the whole first movement done with this, this really lovely, lighter, late classical, early romantic kind of, sort of more opera savvy approach, right? And that was one thing that Beethoven didn't quite have the knack for, or the interest in that kind of sort of lighter opera kind of a sound. He's more interested in taking grand opera sounds and turning them into symphonic kinds of emotions and so on. But so that's what I feel like the Eighth Symphony was all about, right? Him sort of seeing the way everything was trending and then bringing that into his symphony and just kind of having a lot of fun with everybody else's preoccupations and tendencies at the time. So I find the Eighth to be his funniest. And one day I would really love to do an analysis of that, stylistically as well as orchestration, just to say, because some of his jokes are really funny. So that just reminded, seeing this Beethoven work being done in a kind of a Weber style, Weber being his most venomous critic in his day. That was just really lovely. All right, well, great work, George. Now let's take a look at the next participant's entry. Really gorgeous ideas, Alexandre, and there are, they could work, but you would have to adjust a lot of things that are going on. All right, so I don't know if you saw the release of my latest orchestration tip. You can go to orchestrationonline.com, and just on the very first page, it always talks about what's my latest post, right? Latest blog post or whatever, and right at the top of the page, go read it. It talks a lot about using the middle register of the horn as the most sensitive, best register for supporting things. All right. Okay. The problem that you've got here is that we cannot hear any of the delicate stuff that you have going on. These beautiful colors, very low flute scored right in here. We can't hear that anything subtle and beautiful about the flute because the horns are just too high. You got this high F. You're marking it pianissimo, and I can see the frustration here. I've dropped the dynamic all the way down to pianissimo, and I still can't hear the flute. Right? Well, that's just because the overtones, even at pianissimo and the horns, are just completely stomping out anything that you could hear on flute in terms of delicacy and so on. It's even blotting out the bassoons. So here's what I want you to do at home, is I want you to take this, all of this right here, and drop it an octave, right? And the same thing here. So this, notice everything sort of starts out, and then as things progress, you just can't hear anything, right? Here you've got your horns, in the same exact octave as the flutes. Now, Alexandre, have you watched my video 12 common scoring errors? And in one of those talks about how I get so many entries from participants that score the flute in its lowest register, and you just basically can't hear anything because there's so much else going on. Now, in a situation like this, it's very similar to chamber music scoring. It's like all winds. Maybe you have like 7 or 8 players here at the most. Then maybe add a couple more here for your horns. You don't really have a lot of strings going on, just this pizzicato. So you think, well, the players can all sort of listen to each other. However, you have the horns and the flutes. Like you have flutes in their first octave, the most delicate, sensitive, impossible to, and to cover. Just impossible to hear when there's anything in their way, right? And they're being doubled by clarinets and horns, right? So I would say just completely get rid of the flutes or put them an octave higher, right? So that's the first thing. But, really, your focus that you want here is for your oboes. So maybe you don't even need your horns, right? Maybe all you need is just clarinets, bassoons, and oboe, right? So try that with your mock-up, right? Cut the flutes, cut the horns, just listen to this. But if you did want horns there to support, drop them an octave. Now, let's talk about one other thing here in your clarinet part. Do you notice this really strange thing that you have here? You've got the lower pitch tied, and then tied, and tied, and then you have this top pitch moving around, right? So we don't really know what you mean here. Like, do you mean that you just want this low G to sort of stick around, tied, but you want all of these different pitches to be differently articulated? You probably don't mean that. You probably mean for everything to be smoothly played across here. So look, what you need here is to grab your second voice, the lower voice, change it to second voice, change it to, like, in this case, this needs to be, let's move this up here, right? See, so now you got this, and then the first voice, right? See, this is what you mean. Let's get rid of this extraneous rest. Right, that's what you mean, right? So don't ever submit a part like this in intervals, in a conjoined staff like this for 2 parts, right? Now this is kind of interesting. Here you've got these. I would say this would be very appropriate. I can tell that this is the first player, but you can make it even more simple by going like this. Just tell us the name of that player, and cut the second voice. Thomas. Cut the second voice entirely, right? Sorry, it's been. I'm coming back to this after a long vacation, so that's my lame excuse. So yeah. So that works a whole lot better. Now I notice you have this, like you're marking everybody piano, and then here you've marked this forte, and you ended up having to mark this as forte because you had so much weight here with your flutes, your horns, your clarinets, and everything else. So try this. Cut the flutes. They're too low. You don't need them. Cut the horns, right? And then just try this out, and then cut the forte and add a dynamic right in here that pushes towards this. And why is this beginning part 60? Now by this time in the video, Alexandre, you will have heard me talk about this at length, right, in other entries, about how, if you turn this into 60, this ends up sounding like cut time, right? So there's like, just drop this back down to 40. Like I had, the template was at 40. Put it back down at 40. Add a crescendo hairpin here. You could even put a fermata on this D, right? Da 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 da. Then a little diminuendo at the end. Da 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 da. I'm sorry, I can't sing. It's too early in the morning. Da 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 da. Right? And then, da 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 da, right? It just comes in like this beautiful, like. But if this is too fast, then we don't get a sense of a fresh start here, right? It all has to do with nuance. Okay. So that's my advice for the beginning. And, but like, if we were to say, like, well, does this intro set the mood effectively? It would if this were slower, right? Especially in this case. If you were to make this much more listenable, right? I don't think the tubular bells really do anything right here. And if you were to put them in here, like, look at how you're scoring this, like, just like dong, and then just like the player is going to interpret this as, you know, just hitting this pitch and then stopping it immediately, right? Tubular bell players have pedals, right? They have like this foot pedal that that allows the bell to continue vibrating or to cut off, right? In this case, they'll cut it off immediately because you've told them rest here, right? But you could do this, right? Right? So just letting them know you just really want this to hang in the air. Or if you want to be really specific about it, you could do this, right? And then change this into just that, right? If you want to be more, to really determine. But like this, the way that you've scored it is just going to be like donk, right? Now here, we get into a very big problem, and that is, you probably noticed, well, I can't hear the tubular bell part in the mock-up. Well, but maybe that's just because mock-ups don't tell the truth, right? No. You cannot hear the tubular bell here because you are using it in a melodic way and covering that melody with a very powerful first violin part, right? So the first violin part will just basically eat up all of the beautifully complex sound of the tubular bells. So, like, if you really want to make the tubular bell part here much more important, much more present, I would say mark it mezzo forte. By the way, look, where are our dynamic entrance marks? How loud is this supposed to be? If you don't give Sibelius any kind of direction about how loud it should be, it'll assume that you mean mezzo forte, right? So this is going to come through as mezzo forte. So, if that's what you mean, then all right. So I would say, if you want your tubular bell part to be important and to contribute here, it's really fast, by the way. It's just like, tubular bell parts that go this fast, quarter notes in at 120, they end up sort of smooshing together as they play. So it sounds like a bit like a carillon from like a bell tower. Like if you've gone to a university and there's like a really good player, or if they programmed the bells, which they've got like they've got systems that can actually play the bells from a it's almost like a player piano. So if you can hear that, like when the melody gets fast, it just really becomes this big jumble. So you'll get a jumble here, all right? But definitely you would have to start off mezzo forte here. See, like piano, right, is the last thing that you told this part to play, right? Was piano. So everybody else is playing mezzo forte here because you didn't tell them to do anything else except for the cellos, right? And then here, let's see, do you have any hidden dynamics? Let me see. No, you don't. All right, so and the tubular bells are soft, right? So I would say tubular bells should at least be mezzo forte, if not forte here, right? And you just will have to accept the fact that they are going to be this big jumble and kind of clangy and blangy. And even at that, you will have to cut the violins, right? Cut the first violins out. Cut this part right here that goes da da dum, right? Just cut that out. And then just have this supporting part right in here. Now, I don't know. This could have to do with. Let me see how. Yeah, you see you've got live playback selected. Okay, so and I let that go into your mockup. And like the live playback, see live playback data. Oops. Let's go back to that. I'm trying to leave your score the way that I found it. Live playback data takes precedence, right, over just like the way that you have set up the score. So you must have really, like, if you played this in or in some way entered it like through MIDI or some other kind of thing, you must have really had a lot of weight in your cello part, because it just, it's so loud there, right? And it overwhelms everything else. So I would say, like, if you are following my directives here and experimenting with different options, turn your live playback off. Let your accurate notation of how, the dynamic notation of how these parts should go be what everybody hears. So if you would want this to balance with a tubular bell part, let's get back to that. I would say cut the first violin part, cut this little part here with the second violins, just take it from here. Okay, and have, like, maybe mark your string parts, say, like piano, right? Okay, then your tubular bell part has a chance of being heard. Now, if you just want the tubular bell part to be the sort of backgroundy kind of chiming thing that you barely hear, then leave it the way that it is, right? But definitely give us some entrance dynamics here, because it's not helping your score. Now, one last little thing, you've got to have better. Like, okay, so once again, Alexandre, have you watched my my video, 12 common scoring errors? Because what did I say about just dropping the piano slurs onto wind and string parts? Not to do that. I see here it works fine for the tubular bell part, right? It sort of gives the player a bit of an expressive slur, right? So it makes more sense to them. But here, like, you are telling this violin player or these violin players to bow all the way to the end of this bar, right? Then here you're telling them to bow all the way to the end of or to the middle of this bar. We don't have any sense of a pattern of bowing, right? So to be a little bit more to be a little bit more workable, we might want to have a slur here, something like this. Here, I'll just do it for you, right? So, right? So up, down, and then here, I'll cut this. Oops. And then just same thing here. So down, up, and maybe down, right? Throughout the entire thing. See, so that's workable. This isn't. It's just too long, all right? Go study some, some parts from, from some Beethoven symphonies, right? Just how does he slur things. Now this right in here, like the same thing, I would reduce it like this. Just basically just do slurs on each bar. Right? See, so that is much more manageable, and this could go like this. All right, so that is much more workable than what you had before. All right, okay. Now, but the question is, like, does the melody start with elegance, natural transition to octaves? We're really getting away from our evaluation criteria. I mean, yeah, like if you were to just mess around with us a little bit, like if we just accept that the tubular bell part is just going to be a background element and it's not that important, and we're not going to take any pains to make it heard or make it the solo voice here, and we're going to leave the string scoring the way it is, and you're going to give us some dynamics at the beginning here so we know what you mean. Is it mezzo forte? Is it piano? What is it? Right? Okay, so if we know all these things and you correct these slurs and everything else, then I would say, yes, the melody starts with elegance. Yes, there's a natural transition to octaves. Yes, you expand without clogging up. I really like the whole idea of the mezzo staccato right in here. That's great. Okay. Is there a natural flow? Yes, there is. So well done. Right? And I like the little horn part in here. And notice, if you go and read my tip about the middle register of the horn, this is perfect. This is all really great right in here. Okay? However, we immediately get into trouble here. Just like I said right at the very beginning of this evaluation, this is just too damn high. What if you were to drop this an octave? Okay, just drop this whole thing an octave and then listen to it and see if it corrects the problem of not being able to hear the flute. You know, even with this dropped an octave and played pianissimo and everything else, you are still running into, I don't know why you have P and then F here. Okay. But like you still have the problem of the natural radiance of the horn being just so powerful that it'll blot out the flutes, right? Or the flute, your solo flute. All right, see, and we're back to like that same thing that you had here with the oboe, just like saying solo and then having two-part writing here with the second part being in rests, right? But look, it's sorry. All right, and get rid of the select on this. Okay. Look, this is just so much easier to read. Right? Just so much easier. Now, the next question is, do you really want to go da, da, right? So they're going ta. You don't want any ta on the downbeat. Ta, 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 right? Or ta, 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 ta. You don't want any oomph on that downbeat, right? That's what you get when you slur across the downbeat like this. And then here, duh. Absolutely, most bassoonists are going to just ignore this slur and just go ta at the end. Ta, 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 ta. Right? It's just so much easier for them. And then, yeah, and then once again, you know, do the same thing here. Get rid of these rests. And then mark this one solo, right? It's just so much simpler. Now, tutti is for strings. It is not for winds. Look, you don't even need to say tutti. You like see here you marked both parts coming in. So I would say just right here, a duet, right? So with both, right? And you don't even need that here. Look, you've got two voice writing, right? So you don't tutti is wrong, but you don't need to mark a duet because like we have two voice writing, right? So get rid of that. Now here, you didn't tell us how many people are playing. Who's playing, right? Do you mean a duet here? I think you do, because here you do this, you have slurs on either side, and you go G, and then F thirds, and then G thirds, right? So let's put this, just copy paste this, or actually just do like an option click, or alt click, right? So there we go, right? So this is changed. And once again, tutti, like you don't need tutti, you never use tutti on a wind or brass part unless you are writing for band, okay? So you would say a duet, but you don't need to say a duet here because you have two voice writing. So get rid of that. All right. And then this is all fine. This could have been done with, this could have been done in one voice like this. Just, oops, sorry. All right. You could have done that, right? It's actually much more readable, right? All right, so, and then here you could have just gone to, could have said, right? Much cleaner, much easier to read. All right. All right. We've been dealing with score issues. So does this contrast with the theme? Nicely done. Contrast between lines? Yes, you do. Did you need any harmonic support? Well, it's taking over. Your harmonic support is so powerful, it's taking everything over. if you drop your horns here and you still feel like it's too powerful, then just put this part an octave lower in violas, right? And then see what happens, right? And then I think you'll find that that solves every problem, and you don't even need the horns at that point, right? All right, now here we're going to emphatic color of line. All right, so like, I mean, it starts out emphatically, but then here you dip down to a low B, right, with a crescendo. So like you are having your flute crescendo into a part where it is extremely low and at a disadvantage, right? And here you're having it doubled by the clarinet, and the clarinet will basically take over the entire sound, and you won't be able to hear any flutes at all, right? And then here you're having them double, and the flutes just will disappear here. So this is problematic. You might have been better off just having just the clarinets here, right? And just get rid of your flutes, right? And then just bring in the flutes here, where you might have a softer dynamic overall. And once again, you need your horns need to get the hell out of the way of your flutes, because they're just way too high, All right, so you decided not to maintain the strength, but you got up all the way up to a mezzo forte. I like the fact that you end with this. Now, if you want to get the correct kind of playback, then like if you really want to hear this crescendo, then what you could do is you could just put in a hairpin like this and then make it invisible, right? And that's the way to get this to work in playback. If you're just saying piano crescendo mezzo forte, then like we can see it when you select it. So that's how to do it in Sibelius, right? I don't know how you would do it in Dorico, but yeah, once again, nobody's going to hear this flute, right? It's just too soft compared to the clarinet, right? The clarinet is going down into its upper chalumeau range, and and like even with the throat tones, it's being a little weaker. It's still not going to be it's still not going to make any room for the flute right in here, unless everybody is really, really taking pains, like sort of like a like a wind octet or something. But even at that, I don't know of many octets written from this period that would, I don't know if there are any with flute, but I mean if they would put the flute this low, right, in this position. So yeah, so just save the flute for a moment like this with the horns down an octave, right? And don't score them in this way, all right? In their first, going crescendo into their first octave, doubled by an instrument that is just twice, 2 to 3 times as powerful in that same range, all right? But I do like how you fill this in. Like, see, like here, your horns would be better off doubling what's going on in the bassoons at pitch an octave lower, right? So, like, just, be really careful when you take a function out of something as carefully crafted as a Beethoven sonata, and you turn it, like you add an octave higher or you do other things. You just really want to make sure that that all the parts are supported, right? So here you have a part that's going higher, like the supporting part is going higher than the melody, right? So just really be careful for things like that, and it's going higher than the melody in an instrument that is so much more, is like twice as powerful as the melody instruments, right? Even just clarinet, right? The horns, like horns playing mezzo forte are, will make the clarinet sound like it's playing pianissimo, all right? Especially reaching up to this F like this, all right? So just really watch out for the registers and the strengths of the instruments. But all of that aside, all of this pickiness aside, I'm really, really glad that you entered this challenge this year, and I feel that there's so much like that everybody can learn from this, and that that I can also learn from being a coach, and to try to anticipate ways that I can help you become a stronger orchestrator. And I think that this is this really has a lot of promise to it, and I don't want you to give up just because I've been so picky. In fact, I'm really hoping that you will enter next year's orchestration challenge, because the music is so different from this, right? And it will probably give you orchestration ideas that will just be overflowing with imagination and innovation. Okay? I really would love to see you orchestrate the first few bars of, well, you'll have to wait till next year to hear what it is. Okay? So, really nice entry. I've really enjoyed it. I think you have a lot of great ideas in here, and just, if any of my suggestions help to clarify it, then that's great. Okay? Now, let's keep right on rolling to our next entry. Excellent work, Oscar. I mean, there's some breathtaking textures in this. Very beautiful. All right, so that said, I think you should have proofread this a little bit better. Don't you think? You know, da da dun. Isn't that a B and then a C, right? And then you have such beautiful support right in here for your parts, but you leave out support for your actual melody after giving it a wrong note and the downbeat, right? Couldn't the first oboe have supported here just like it does in the next bar? Anyway, so all those quibbles aside, it's a really nice piece of work. But of course, you know what I'm going to say. You turned your adagio cantabile into an andante, right? 60, you turned it into 60, and this is 120, so this sounds like cut time, all right? And I think you just threw away this, I mean, you have this beautiful moment right in here, right? I mean, what about the, I rail at my by my orchestration challenge participants to look for the nuance, to look for the inflection, right? I mean, imagine this at 40. Da, 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 da. Then Richardando with a crescendo. Da, 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 Pramada. Come on down off of it very gently. Da, da, diminuendo. Da, 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 da. Breath. Da 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 da. I mean, isn't that much more satisfying? I mean, think about that, Oscar. I mean, really think about like the meaning of the music, right? So like taking this orchestration, adding those inflections, those nuances, the stretching of the tempo, and everything else. Don't you think that that would set the mood much more effectively for the rest of it? I think so. So, I'm sorry. Like I keep coming back to this, and it feels to me like I'm coming back at it stronger and stronger each time, as if I'm trying to convince everybody to write it my way. But it's just because I'm seeing it so often now. Like I'm seeing almost, is it half of the entries by now are choosing to up the tempo of their adagio up to a 60 rather than a 40, or just imagine, like, how slow did Spencer Myer think that the intro needed to be in order to set the mood effectively for him? It was 20 beats per measure, or 20 beats per minute, right? So wow, 60 seems so fast, right? And it's over and done in a second. Woo, diddly-doo, ba-da-dee-da-da. You know what I'm saying? It just feels flip to me. All right? Especially, and I probably wouldn't be so emphatic if the orchestration of the main section wasn't so beautiful. Right? So gorgeous. The way that this sounds so serene and it just sounds like a slice of the early 19th century. Done so well, and of course like the way that you have mixed the mock-up and everything else. That just, that's fantastic. So why are we in such a rush to get over this intro? I don't understand it. I don't understand. Maybe people could explain to me in the comments why they felt that the intro needed to be so short. Okay. But I think you should just treat this like you are starving for something delicious, and you finally get that ice cream cone, and you just take your time because that is the tastiest ice cream in the world at that moment in your life. So why just chomp through it immediately, right? Just enjoy the flavors. Let them roll across your tongue. Take the time you need. Now, having said all that, looking at the way this is scored, I think it's intriguing that you have your first bassoon part go so high, all the way up to that G. And it's perfectly doable, right? But just be aware that like you have this thinner inside sound at the same time as you have the richer like lower clarino part and upper throat tone like B flat right in there. So I mean, if the player is playing thinly, then it's more matched, but then it's less rich, right? So yeah, so I mean, I don't know if it's the most ideal, but it's a really interesting idea. Okay, I mean, this is the kind of thing where like it starts off really well, but then by this E, like this whole E F sharp G thing could have been second clarinet, and then this middle voice right in here could have been like first oboe, and then you would have gotten like the most perfect balance of all. Anyway, but I mean, it's like it wouldn't really sound acoustically or timbrally all that different. Right? So, anyways, those are my thoughts on the intro. Like I think you kept it simple. That was really, really great. And a little touch of strings, lower strings on the bottom. That was all great. Okay, so now, does the melody start with elegance? So beautifully, and I love the way that you were thinking about the bowing patterns that would be needed for your string players. So gorgeous, right? And I think that you should match in all parts. Like the right here, the if the concertmaster doesn't catch this, the principal viola will, and they will want their bowing to match the same as all the sections so that it all sounds unified, right? So they'll just cut this in half and just have the same bowing as the parts above. So yeah, so is there a natural flow? There is, but once again, I feel this is acrobatic in a way because like you're trying to have a slur from this this up to here, and you're not going to be doing like if it were F, that would be like a string crossing, but here you're doing it in G, and yeah, it can flow across the strings and so on, but and it's an open G, and that's all doable. But I mean, I just feel like you already are playing that note with your double basses. You don't even need it in your cellos, right? It's just so much smoother to just save the slur for right here. Just have the cellos come in here, right? But yeah, but like the way that it's scored, it's okay. I just don't feel it's all that graceful. All right, it's almost like you're adding more than really needs to be there, right? To me. But yeah, like I'm sure there's a cellist in my Patreon group. You know who you are, so you'll probably say, that doesn't matter, it's all fine, don't listen to Thomas. But I just feel like, just in terms of the sheer elegance that you're trying to portray here, that you're trying to do here, it's a little unnecessary. But I mean, it's fine. Okay, yeah, so is there a natural transition to octaves? Yes, I mean, just so nicely done. Here, I would say like this might work really well as like portato, just like rather than just like dun dun dun, just to sort of match the kind of feeling of connectedness, right, that is going on in the other parts, right? Because this is a bunch of D's playing against the cello, so like it's something that like if you just dropped a dotted half note here, it would be too constant. But if you are just sort of kind of give it a limping sort of a feel, it'll fit in with the flow of the rest of the music. And you'll see that, like you put that right in here with your A clarinets, right? So why aren't the violas matching the A clarinets or the A clarinet? And this is really lovely too, the way that you have both sets of violins in unison with a single oboe. That's a beautiful sound. That's definitely, you've been doing your homework. That is definitely a classical era sound. So you just get the warmth of a single instrument and its color and a little bit of its character as a solo instrument without it really being a solo, right? So better to not mark this solo. And so that all the instruments work together and you just get this beautiful warm sound, which you can hear in the mock-up. That is an honest interpretation. All right. Now, you probably didn't even need this bass note here of this D, right? Try your mock-up and just leave it out and then see what it sounds like, right? Because like Beethoven has the implication of the D in the music, right? This is like, you can hear that he goes to a D because he's giving you a D in the pattern, which is actually a C sharp, right? A G sharp to C sharp, but he's giving you that 5 in the context of the pattern, so you probably don't even need to have this held pitch, right? Okay. All right, now natural transition to octaves. Beautifully done here. You bring in your flutes, and this is a really wonderfully scored flute part. I like here, you've got your middle voice, second flute, and it is doubling the oboe part, and you're doing it in a register where just, it works okay. The dynamic doesn't get too loud. The combination is in the sweet spot of the oboe. The oboe isn't playing too loud, so these will combine in a wonderfully organic way. And because of the more present quality, because of those two instruments combining below, they will reinforce the first flute enough to where it doesn't get swallowed up by the first violins, right? So that was nicely done. Does it expand without clogging up? Yeah. So yeah, and I like the way that the second bassoon rides along with the double bass. All right, so that's good. And then just this little touch here. All right, so this is a really great use of natural horns, just playing C's and G's, right, 1s and 5s. It's just so nicely done, in character with that period. Okay, now we get to the Leggermente. All right, so just do you contrast the theme? Yes, because you've held off on solo clarinet for these intervening bars, right? So the solo comes back in, playing Leggermente. So you've got the harmonic support below. You felt that you needed harmonic support. Some people did, some people didn't. Here you state it very, very nicely. Ta 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 ta. It's just it's really nicely done over the legato below, and kept very simple. So that's really great. And then when the bassoon comes in with it supported by pizzicato, it's also really beautifully done. And then and this is exactly the way to score it. So a previous participant might want to see how this is, how to score things. So you don't say tutti, you would say due. You wouldn't want to just say solo with a just and dropping in like the second voice rest. Here it's just simpler just to say one solo and just have a single voice, right? And then this is nice right in here. You have the flutes come in, just kind of doing the same thing that the clarinets did before, but then this time you've got second oboe supported by clarinets this time, and more voices and so on, and then bassoon continuing on. Yeah, and so it all just, this is so beautifully period. It's just so nicely done. And then here we get into, da 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 da. So this is a really nice way of dealing with this. We have our overtones inherent right in here, like you sort of, they would swallow up like a high G if you threw in a high G here, right? You could put one in though. I'm still, it would be fine with me. And then you just wait to this C before you bring in your first flute at an octave higher, and I think that this works excellently. And then in here you have a trade-off or a dovetail into the first clarinet part with the oboe coming back in to support the first flute. So it's just really nicely done, nicely thought out. And then here you have got even further support here with the with your second bassoon doubling the clarinet. So, it's, I mean, it's like, it's good that you separate the functions going forward, right? You get to this C and then, so that's, I mean, this is something that, like, it's good that you also have the cushion of the second violins and first violins right in here, just kind of doubling this. So this all works pretty well, and you get that sheen above from the oboes and the clarinets. Excuse me, the oboes and the first flute, or the oboe and first flute. So this has a nice color. It's well thought out. That ends up providing the harmonic density, and this sets up really, really well. However, one thing I would take issue with is, I mean, I'm not so sure that it works out well, like pianissimo crescendo to piano. I feel that this wants to crescendo more, right? So maybe you could go crescendo to mezzo forte and then diminuendo out to this piano. See, I think this would be a case where that would actually work better than going up to a mezzo forte forte and then going piano subito. I think just the most elegant way that you have devised this, I think you just need more force going in the middle and then ease out into the piano. I think that works better than dropping because of the way that everything is set up so nicely. So that might be something you might want to experiment with your mock-up and see if that suits you. Maybe it won't. All right, but that answers the question of, the harmonic density, setting up the texture. That's done really nicely. Here, like, look, if you're going to do this with your second oboe part, then you better do this with your viola part, right? Portato, please. There's this one little picky point that I wanted to talk about. Now, what is that? I just want to make sure that I get to it before we... Okay, so I can't remember what it was, so hopefully I'll remember before we get to the end of this. All right, so this works great. And then you just basically you use subtractive dynamics, right? So you just you don't change the dynamics for anything. I already talked about going, B, C here, and using the support of the first oboe to do that. I just don't understand, right? Why there's no support here. Maybe even first flute, playing in its first octave, is a great way to get subtractive here. All right. Yeah, and then once again, why no portato here, but portato there, right? I don't get it. So, yeah. Anyways, so this all works fine with me. And I really, once again, I really like this use right in here. So just, contrasting different registers, contrasting the amount of force. I think that all works really, really, really great. Perhaps well, no, don't mess with it. No, it's all nicely done. So here, you wouldn't say unison, you would say non-divisi, okay? So yeah, so it's like unison would imply that there had been two separate parts that had different functions, like a solo part and a gli altri, right? And then you would bring those two separate parts together unison, or you would have two staves doing separate parts, and then you would mark unison on like a single note, right? But here it's better to say non-divisi, okay? So yeah, so don't follow a divisi with a unus, all right? Okay, so all of those picky points aside, I really enjoyed this and thought it was just very fun scoring, and just a couple little notes for you. This is great that you said transpose score here. You could just say, you don't even have to say composed by. You just say Ludwig van Beethoven, or even just say Beethoven, and you could just say orch, O-R-C-H period, and you can say by or not by, and then you just say, Oskar Hronkoski. Now, in my case, I just say orch by T. Goss, right? Because I like the the score is the important thing, and like not me, right? So I try to subtract myself as much as possible. People who care about it are going to look it up and say they'll look up to the top of the page and they'll say, "Oh, T. Goss, yeah." So this is one of Thomas's pieces, and they'll know how to get in touch with me, or they'll talk to the orchestra and get in touch with me. So yeah. Anyway, all that aside, fantastic work, Oscar, and I wish that you had. I wish that, like as we can sort of hear, and that fade out, you took on a few more bars, and that had a really interesting approach. And maybe this is all the time that you had to contribute, but wow, it would have been great to hear like 2 or 3 more sections of the whole movement or both movements, right? It was so powerful at the beginning. All right, so great. Now on to our final participant for this very, very long lecture, very, very long dive into this pile of evaluations for our website subscribers. Okay, David. So that is a great way to finish off this very, very long set of evaluations. Just, yeah, really nicely done. Just like the previous uh, example, you have really captured a lot of the character and style. And I notice you're going all out here. Bearbeitung für kleines Sinfonieorchester. You're really giving us like, um, you know, I mean, and also like combining the cello and bass staff. You're trying to really play by the rules of that era. Okay, so just a few things. Even in that era, there would be a separation between in staff lines. I know it's a small kleines orchestra. You are, but still, I would want to see these bar lines to separate between the sections. It's just really helpful for me. Anything that has a separate bracket should just have its own bar line, right, separated from the others. And another thing is any way that you could kind of format your score to fit my screen, right? To fit just if your PDF doesn't fit a normal aspect ratio, then it's you could turn this into 2 pages that just are better formatted or something like that, because like you can see, compared to some of the previous ones, your staff size and the font size, right, of your notes and so on is very small on my screen. So I mean, it doesn't bother me because I'm looking at this on an enormous screen. So no problem with me, but like a lot of people are watching these on their laptops. Okay, so those are just a couple picky little things, all right, and observations. One thing I will observe here is, after sitting here belly aching about people having their intros being really fast, comparatively speaking, yours is nice and slow. One thing, but do you notice there's something? I guess this is done in Dorico, right? Or is it Finale? It looks like a Dorico part to me. So, anyways, there's a kind of a weakness, isn't there? With that sounding D in whatever that sound set is being used. I'm just really noticing that when people score da 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 da, it's like it just really sounds like just sounds so weak, and that is actually a beautiful, measured, full note with a good player. Like, who did they sample? Who did they record to get that? It just sounds so, ugh. Brr. Gives me the creeps. So this should be a nice full note. Anyhow, all right. Well, let's go to the very well-crafted intro. Did it set the mood effectively? Absolutely. And let's talk about some of the reasons for that. Okay. Oops. Okay. So one little thing I want to talk about first: cellos and contrabasses. Okay. Yeah, you were really trying to capture the essence of that era, but I would say part of that was Beethoven in dividing the identities. A lot of his scoring, like if he was going to have this much difference in parts and in roles and so on, he would have separate staves. Okay, so that's something to think about for later. And here you wouldn't be, if you're going to say this is cellos and double basses, you don't need to have two voice writing here. Okay, all right. So let's go back to this, thinking about all that. Starting off with cellos and double basses in that F octave, and you've got this just wonderful part writing in here, with your horn starting off in unison with your first bassoon and your second clarinet. So you notice there was like this kind of phasing sound, wasn't there? And that's because of the combining. That's like putting the clarinet in there with the horn and the bassoon. So I think you could easily just leave out these notes on the clarinet and have the second come in here, and you would avoid that, right? And you would still get the sound that you need. But I mean, if you want that phased sound, there's no problem. It all works. It works for me if that's the color you want. And then this is just such a beautiful chorale as this rises, and you're just really going into that sweet spot of the upper part of the middle register of the horn. So nicely done and nicely supported from below by the winds. And that is something that is not the easiest thing to do, but you just had these. Upper chalumeau for your second clarinet, and then the kind of like the middle tenor, lower tenor register of your bassoon. So it all worked out perfectly. All right, then we get to here, and then you do this effortless handoff, right? It's not a dovetailing, you're just handing off the rolls to first clarinet and first violins combined, and that is just so beautiful. At least until we get to hear to this sounding D in the mock-up, where are you happy with that? Okay, so if you're a Dorico user, right, let's say that this is Dorico, or if you're Finale or whatever, and that's the sound set you're using, nobody's complained about that to whoever made that. I mean, yeah, it's a realistic sound. It's a realistic sound for a clarinet player who's not concentrating. Okay, that written E, right, should have a nice, measured, full sound. It shouldn't sound like the player's about to fall apart, or that they kind of the reed needs to be changed, or they just, they didn't quite come up under the note and get into it the right way, right? It just, fix it. Whoever is out there, if somebody out there is responsible for that sound being produced and distributed to people who use this notation software, you should know better. Okay? It is not an acceptable sound. Okay? Anyways, sorry. But it's just starting. This is maybe the fourth or fifth entry that I've heard that sound. It's just starting to really pall. Okay. But, all that aside, let's assume, I can just turn that off and just use my inner ear and look at this, and it sounds gorgeous, right? My clarinet player in my brain knows how to play a written E, Okay. So I think that this really, really works great. And look, you could have had a little bit of a nuance here, a little push into this. Maybe even, like I mentioned before, a little fermata on the middle of the bar, right? A little diminuendo coming out if you're going to push into it. That would all work really, really great with the melody. And I like the way that the horn just sort of eases out and lets the other elements here take over, the middle strings and the bassoon kind of underpinning right in here, viola and the second violin. That just works really nicely, and yeah, it's a good combination all around. So yeah, so I would say yes. The intro sets the mood effectively, beautifully so, right? All right, then going on. This is done so nicely, and here, like, my only issue with this is that I feel that these slurs are just a little strange, right? But we'll talk about that when we get there. And with this, this more aggressive kind of dynamic, and just like this really nice, like chugging kind of accompaniment. So, like, here I would say natural flow. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's natural. It's not really a flow. It's more of like a motor, right? And I think that works really, really well with this approach of, unison horns playing, this sounding C and so on. And yeah. And then this F here below, like, once again, also unison with your bassoons. You might have gotten a little bit more strength here by going to an octave, right? So, I mean, I think that all works. And then, the main issue that I keep delaying commenting on is that, like, after telling everybody, oh, slur this and slur that and slur that, it's mainly because people wanted to get, they were implying by the way that they were leaving the slur on there that they wanted a smoother sound, right? So here, you don't really need that because you just are, it's all built right into it. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and so on, right? So I would say that absolutely, the melody, well, starts with elegant. I mean, it's elegantly scored, but it's not about elegance, right? It's about force and about, optimism and everything else. So I think that works really, really good. And this I've got really no problems with the way that you framed the accompaniment with the horns and the bassoons here. This is very, very full, and then like you have your cellos going da 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 da, and it works out really, really great. Okay. Here is an example where I would actually write this out. I would write this out as sixteenths rather than putting the measured tremolo mark on it, just to be absolutely sure, right? And same thing, I would like do the first beat of this written out as sixteenths, and then added the measured tremolo mark afterwards, just to really absolutely make sure that the players, who might be just sight reading this, don't think, maybe like there's just some tiny little chance, some level of player, some level of focus will end up giving you an unmeasured tremolo. Okay, so just write it out to be absolutely sure, just on the first beat, right? This is the first and only beat you ask for a measured tremolo, so just write it out. Write out the first one here, and then just continue on. And same thing here, just like write out the first one and then have a dotted half note with a measured tremolo mark over it, and so on. Everybody will get it. Or you could have like probably a better way to do it is just to write out one beat in sixteenths and then like a quarter note with the measured tremolo over it, then a half note with a measured tremolo. So it's just like just dividing the bars in half visually, and rhythmically. And this is nice right in here. So it's one thing I would just say is that the dynamics are a little strange. Da 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 da. I mean, just feel like you don't feel any kind of push in the middle here, right? But it is nice that you allow the texture to get out of the way a little bit, so your oboe solo can be nice and big. Now there's a little bit of a discrepancy here. Oboe, then we see a single voice part throughout the entire thing. Okay, so that's an oboe, right? And clarinetti in B. So how many clarinetti, right? Well, we assume 2, right? So, but you have to tell us how many, right? You can't just say clarinetti, fagotti, corny, right? You have to tell us in these wind and brass parts how many, right? You could say clarinetti, eins und zwei, or just like Roman numeral 1, ampersand, Roman numeral 2 in B. All right. So all right. So now here we get into natural transition to octaves. Beautifully done, nicely done with the oboe right underneath and just bringing out so naturally. It's just so beautifully scored. Okay. Expanding without clogging up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, pretty much. Okay. My problem with this is the slur in the middle, like slurring across the and then this slurs from the downbeat, and it's a mess, David. I think do you really want that da 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 da? Okay, so if you want that da 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 da, if you hear that, that's great, but don't throw that. It's like it would be better for you to put a slur on this and have this portato, right, to sort of match the slurring of these other parts. But don't have slurs that work against each other in the phrasing from within. All right, it just really weakens the natural arc of the phrase that you feel. Right. So I'm not going to judge whether or not this strategy is right or wrong. I don't hear it, but you hear it, and that's good enough for me. And it works with the bowing too. Here we've got a down, up, down, right? Or what you might actually see here is I would suspect that you might get 2 down bows or 2 up bows in a row, probably 2 up bows in a row, so that this can be a nice down bow. Okay. Yeah, that's. Trying to think. I was only a concertmaster for a very short while in a student orchestra, but down, up, down. Yeah, see, because there's a natural, you didn't put in a crescendo here, but there's a natural feeling of crescendo. I feel just in terms of the intensity and of course the oboe part rising and everything else. So yeah, so as this sort of pushes towards the downbeat here, I would go down, up, down. So I would mark 2 up bows in a row here for my fellow section players, right? Okay. But this sort of implies if you're going to have this slur here, and you're going to have these lower slurred parts, right? You have this kind of middle part and everything else. You have this little contrary motion thing happening here between oboe and first clarinet, right? So it just really kind of implies that the slur needs to be here, not here, right? So not going from beat 4 to beat 1. I really see no need for you to to slur into the downbeat. I think you could slur this and do this as portato, right? So that is da, right? So same thing here, da, right? And I think that would work. And it's just all of this, right? Or this could just be a slur. It doesn't need any portato because you don't have any repeated notes. But yeah. Anyways, so just this needs to be cleaned up. I don't, yeah. But this is really nice right in here. So do you expand without clogging up? Yes. The natural transition to octaves, beautifully done. All right. So just just trying to get everything to kind of work together. Yeah. No problem with the horn part there. That's nice. I would almost feel maybe you might want to have a diminuendo at the end. So if you had a push in the middle and then the diminuendo coming out, I think that just putting a little bit of warmth in the middle of that phrase would work beautifully. Okay, so that takes us to the next section. So contrast with theme, yeah, because here we got these violas, right? But crescendo, shouldn't you just establish a dynamic at the beginning that is enough? Leggermente, right? What happened to leggermente? Don't you want to tell these players that they should play with a certain amount of flash, right? And why are these players slurring and these players going staccato, or the players, a due, you're still players. So I don't get it. Like, so you want, and you really don't want any kind of push on the downbeat here in this phrase. Like you could go up, down, up, right? Up, down, up. So like having the bow push on the, like having it change direction gives you the impulse of the beginning, right? And then here, like you're slurring into the downbeat. And then here you're going ta-ta-ta-ta-tum. But I mean, and then, like from the other angle, you might say, well, Thomas, what I wanted a contrast between the, the feeling of smoothness answered by sort of a chuckling bassoon, right? So I mean, I guess I understand that, like, and like you just want it to be really smooth. Excuse me, really smooth, and that's why you slurred into the downbeat. Okay, I mean, I'll accept that, and you do have the punctuation of the pizzicato on the downbeat, right? So I mean, yeah, okay, I'll accept that, right? But I still think that you should, it's just, I mean, crescendo. Like, what does that mean? Are you just saying that you want, like, you were piano here, so you want this to be piano, and then mezzo piano to mezzo forte, and then forte? I mean, or piano to mezzo piano to mezzo forte, forte, or something, or poco poco crescendo, or I mean, what does crescendo mean here? I don't get it. And what does it mean there? Like that's would probably you would get the raised hands at rehearsal, and like the violist would be saying, "Do you want us to go crescendo, to the beginning of the forte, or what do you want?" And then like the other players would be saying, "Well, why don't I go crescendo?" And it's just like what you need here is leggermente, and you want some kind of dynamic here that differentiates this from the supporting parts. So right here, like your supporting parts of clarinet, since they're placed higher in pitch and they have more pungency because of them being clarinets, they cut through so much more clearly than your poor violas, right? So if you marked this is a situation where I would say, like, don't do your dynamic mixing, have everybody be piano. I would say, like, either mark everybody piano and mark the violas soli, and the same thing here with your bassoons who need a marking. Right, so like here you have piano, and then here's the beginning of a new section. You say piano. These guys are marked piano, but how come these guys don't have a marking, right? So like crescendo is not enough. So leggermente, right? We want the feeling, like Beethoven put that in there. He wants some flash. He wants some excitement. So yeah, so you either do that, mark them solely, or you just mark the part up, like mezzo forte on both of these parts, and then like these guys will stay in the background, right? So that's another way of dealing with it. Okay. All right. Much as I hate to do dynamic mixing in a piano part. All right, so all that aside, nicely done. Harmonic support needed. It's good except for the clarinets being over this line. So like you could hear on the mock-up, like what did your ear focus on was the clarinets, not really the violas, right? So it's a challenging thing because the clarinets take so much bandwidth, right? And the violas are, they are built to be a supporting instrument, so they really have to play out in order to be heard over your clarinets. You could even mark your supporting parts pianissimo, right? And then have have these guys piano soli, right? And that would be like a more realistic sound as well. Okay, so all right, I'll get off of it. But yeah, so emphatic color of line is beautifully set up here. Harmonic density, you've got your built into the to your supporting parts here, the violas and cellos and double basses, plus the bassoons and horns. So that's set up really nicely. Okay, and I really like the way that you did the triplets, kind of the little hooking parts right in here with the second and so on, and then there's just like the other stuff that's going on here in the clarinet part. I think that all really works great, and the oboe part and so on. Okay, all right. My problem here is that you you don't have a consistency of dynamics, right? And you can hear it in the mock-up. You know, da 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 dun dun dun. You know, I mean that's fine to go piano subito here, but why do we have a diminuendo in these parts and not in these other parts? Like you can hear the clarinet and the bassoons going diminuendo, but like and you can hear the horns coming in soft, right? And everybody else is just playing loudly to the very end. So perhaps you were like thinking, well, it takes up too much room in the sound picture. So I'm going to just tame it a little bit and kind of work around it, and and then this will work together. But I think that everybody has got to go diminuendo, or everybody has got to be loud to the end for this to work. Now obviously, like if you want this to be a subsidiary part, you could just mark it mezzo forte, just a little bit below, like if you feel it's interfering too much. But considering the fact that your oboe part is also a bit of a subsidiary part, or just the kind of playing around the fringes of everything else, sort of along with the first clarinet providing kind of inner harmonization to what's going on in the strings, and they don't get any kind of diminuendo, right? And I can't tell whether or not this diminuendo is supposed to be first and second voice because of the relationship of the first to the oboes, right? See, so it's all jumbled up. So you just have to make this all definitively one thing or another, or else you just waste a lot of rehearsal time, right? Okay. Now, I mean, it's cool the way that you've got this forte, piano subito, and this is a case yes, you're doing this in that style, that period, and so on. So, like, we could infer that that this is intended to be piano subito, not marked in every part. Was this a little bit of forgetfulness here? Did you leave out the piano on purpose or not? Okay, so this is all implied here that it's piano subito because of the period and everything else, right? But like I think even if you were to get this played by small orchestra, community orchestra, you put in the piano subito for these other parts, okay? Or just have everybody go diminuendo. All right, and then I really love the answer, like you have you have full-bodied timpani and everything else. I think that if you're going to do this with your double basses and cellos, then you totally don't need timpani right in here. You could have your double basses go to pizzicato or something on these last two notes or something, and you get exactly the same effect. And the same thing here. If you're going to go double basses, pizzicato, you really don't need your timpani right in there. I would say just save them for these bigger pushes, bigger thumps. And this is kind of cool in here. Leave that in. But this is really, really nice. Just like the way you have the different colors answering each other, right? So this kind of darker color with a thump on the timpani and the really simple string scoring, and then here you have winds kind of in a cooler sort of a function right in here. The clarinet will tend to dominate this even at piano, right? And then horns right in here. The horns are going to tend to also be a little bit brighter than you possibly think, right? So just be careful about that. They will sound more like mezzo piano to mezzo forte, at least the first will. So I would say mark this pianissimo to get a better blend and cut the timpani, and then this will really sound beautiful. Now and then just come back forte with everybody here. Yeah. So those are my thoughts about that, David, and just such attention to detail, and and getting into the period, and just once again, I'm thinking about next year's entry, and about how it is really a part of its period in a very prophetic way. And yet it's by a composer who you just completely would not even imagine would sound like that. And will probably inspire you to, like with this kind of focus that you've got here on, really trying to capture the soul of the period and so on. I mean, I'm trying to imagine what that would be like for you. So I invite you to, everybody in this, like I have not yet seen a single entry where I would not, it doesn't really inspire me to imagine how they would take on next year's entry. So yeah, so great work, everybody. I feel like this turned into sort of a masterclass. Like especially like the first few entries, just really gave me a ton of things to talk about. It was almost like 4 entries were like the length of a normal one of these. But once again, like sometimes I have to go through a certain number of things and explain them and so on, and then I don't have to explain them later on, so it makes the later entries a little shorter. And then, like, there are different areas of focus that don't take as long to explain or to talk about or whatever. Maybe there's just more, saying, hey, this works and this is why. It takes a lot less time to explain than something that doesn't work, right? So, anyways, great job, David. Great job, everyone. I really felt happy about this. This is my first video since coming back from California, and I really felt good about it. Even though, wow, it was way more work than I was expecting, but it's still great. It's, just really reminding me that I can't take anything for granted, and there's a lot of joy in that, because I always like learning from things and not just going on automatic and thinking that I can just do, I can just solve every problem without really thinking about it. So, anyhow, tomorrow we'll get into the next few semi-brev Patreon releases, and then get into the dotted semi-brev, and then next weekend we'll have another one of these compilations, which I'm really looking forward to putting together. All right, so stay tuned for all of that. Thanks everybody for watching, and thank you so much, all of you out there who have been leaving comments, anything from, just brief acknowledgments and signs of appreciation, all the way to just like really detailed evaluations of your own. I appreciate it all, and keep it coming.